Okay, I think that we can start. Welcome everyone. This is an event organized in the context of the High-Level Political Forum 2022. It is entitled Multilevel Governance, Accelerated Progress Towards the SDGs and the Post-Pandemic Recovery. Welcome again, everyone. My name is Martino Miraglia, and I do work in the team on SDG localization and local governments within the UN Habitat Urban Practices branch based in Nairobi. I will be the facilitator of the event today, which looks great with a series of very different and very interesting speakers, researchers, research institutions, member states, development agencies, UN agencies, and many partners also from all over the globe. So I hope that you will enjoy as much as I'm sure I will. I am your facilitator, so I'm not taking too much of the time for this session, because I will leave the floor very soon to the speakers that will give us some welcoming remarks. Just to say that this event is led by UN Habitat in the context of a larger partnership and close cooperation with some key partners, such as the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany, the German Agency for Development Cooperation, that have supported this event in many ways, but also the development of the online platform on multi-level governance that will be launched at the end of the session. The event is also organized together with some key partners that have helped us in really developing the knowledge around multi-level governance in the past months and years. ARCO, the colleagues of ARCO that have led global research on multi-level governance, colleagues of UCLG, LSE-CITES, Brookings Institution, and the Nelson Mandela Forum School of Public Governance. Of course, we have also the pleasure to host a guest of the United Nations System Staff College that is under the guidance of GIZ have worked with us during this journey. This is to mention quickly a new initiative that we really want to push forward on the concept and the practices of multi-level governance. We will hear more from Shipra Naranksuri, which is a special guest opening today this panel, on how really we truly believe in harnessing the power of multi-level governance, in strengthening multi-level governance systems across the globe in order to advance the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, but also in fostering the recovery from the pandemic. For today's session, like housekeeping remarks, please just keep your microphone on mute if other speakers are speaking, and put your questions and remarks in the chat. I aim to be really an interactive session rather than frontal kind of presentation. So we are here to listen to you. Also, please remind yourself that the whole process and exchanges of the session will feed into the advanced and the final draft of the global research on multi-level governance that is going to be launched in October. So we really want to hear your ideas, experiences, and practices. After the opening remarks, we will hear more about the preliminary findings of the global research by the colleagues of ARCO, Action Research for Co-Development, and then we will move into breakout rooms. So 3 different breakout rooms that will touch upon some key dimensions of multi-level governance that will be facilitated by 3 different key partners and knowledge institutions, namely United States local governments, London School of Economics, and Brookings institutions. Each of the rooms will have a specific case study that we have the honor to host, and that will give us the pleasure to share their experience in that breakout rooms, and you will be able to participate in a debate facilitated by our knowledge partners on the specific case study. We will then convene back and present the results of the UN Staff College course on localizing the SDGs and officially launch the platform on multi-level governance. This is our way through for the next couple of hours, but without further ado, then I will give the floor to Shipra Naranksuri, the Chief of the Urban Practices Branch within UN Habitat, for her welcoming remarks. Over to you, Shipra.
Thanks, Martino. Great to see so many colleagues, Alexander from BMZ, many other friends and colleagues in the room. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. It's fascinating that we're back online after being together at the World Urban Forum with many of you just a week or 10 days ago. But this is the way we are in our hybrid world, and I think we have to sort of straddle both these universes. I'm really pleased to be joining you for this session. It sounds like a fascinating discussion, but more than that, it has been a fantastic journey so far. This event on multi-level governance to accelerate progress towards the SDGs and post-pandemic recovery comes at a great time, comes at a moment when we are discussing the ideas, the concepts of multi-level governance, when we are at the high-level political forum, which is talking about only 7.5 years left to achieve the SDGs. How are we going to do this? The initiative itself is aimed at unpacking the concept and the practices of multi-level governance and equipping national and local governments with cutting-edge guidance and tools to strengthen multi-level cooperation and to advance sustainability and recovery from the pandemic. But of course, just to reinforce what Martino said, a moment to thank the partners that made this initiative possible, the BMZ, Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation Development, and GIZ, for their support, but also for this continuing and ongoing partnership to advance the 2030 agenda. This initiative is part of the BMZ Recover Forward Toolkit, which to us is an example of state leadership in transforming global commitments into action and shows how concrete support can be offered to partners and communities all over the world. We are very glad to be part of this process. Also, a big thanks to the knowledge partners who are here today and who worked with us over past several months, ARCO, UCLG, LSE Cities, Brookings, and the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance for their contribution to the research process, as well as for their continued leadership in this space, in the space of governance and in the space of SDG localization. A final word for the UN System Staff College, our staff college, that has contributed very much to the Recover Forward Toolkit and with the course on localizing SDGs, and the partners that are going to present today, Argentina, Ghana, Italy, Jordan, and the Philippines, to inspire the discussion and inspire the development of new global knowledge. So a very big thanks to all of you for this fantastic collective effort, which we are very, very pleased and very humbled to be part of. Colleagues, at UN Habitat, we strongly believe in the power of partnership, of co-creation, and knowledge sharing. Only if we pull our resources and expertise together across sectors, between spheres of government, will we be able to successfully recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and address the multiple crises that are facing us and that are endangering our very existence, the existence of our planet and our societies. And we're not in a good space. Let me quote here from the Secretary General's most recent report on the achievement of the SDGs, which says that years or even decades of development progress have been halted or reversed by the pandemic, with catastrophic effects on people's lives and livelihoods and on global effects to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. What does this mean? This means that an additional 75 to 95 million people will live in extreme poverty in 2022 compared to pre-pandemic levels. It means that 100 million more children fell below the minimum proficiency level in reading and in other areas of academic learning due to difficulties in accessing schooling. It means that an additional 100 million women aged 25 to 54 fell out of the workforce globally since 2020, and domestic violence rates reached unprecedented levels. At the same time, the pandemic has also hit our governance systems and our institutions quite hard. As national and local health systems were overwhelmed coping with the pandemic, many essential services to local communities were disrupted. Jobs were lost, wages dropped, businesses closed, as a result of which local and regional governments have lost an average of 15 to 20% of their revenues as compared to 2020. So friends, how do we recover from these massive impacts? And how do we prepare ourselves to face the new challenges undoubtedly coming our way? How do we make sure that our recovery process is sustainable and inclusive and helps in achieving the objectives set by our global agreements and agendas? The 2030 Agenda itself tells us how. The agenda acknowledges that no national or local government can achieve the SDGs alone. Its implementation, the achievement of the goals and the targets, and the implementation of the multiple agreements that underpin these goals and targets rely on multi-level governance and collaboration. And the New Urban Agenda clearly also identifies multi-level governance as a key means of implementation. It embraces a whole of government and whole of society coordination, engaging mandates, roles, and capacities of a very wide set of levels and actors. The centrality of multi-level governance also emerged strongly in two key recent events. The high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the review of the New Urban Agenda and the 11th edition of the World Urban Forum in Katowice, where all stakeholders reinforced that collaboration across governance spheres is the only way possible to achieve sustainability at the local level. The increasing space that voluntary local reviews are gaining in the context of the HLPF and more broadly within national reporting processes is another important sign of how multi-level dialogue can accelerate SDG progress. And that is why at UN Habitat, and with the key support of our partners, we've decided to invest time and resources to better understand the different dimensions of multi-level governance, with specific attention given to harnessing its potential to accelerate the localization of the SDGs. The result of this effort is the launch of this first ever global platform entirely dedicated to multi-level governance, which my colleagues will present later at the end of this session, as well as global research on multi-level governance for SDG localization. The first summary report of this is already available on the platform. I won't get into the details here as we will hear more from our research team and partners throughout the session, but let me underline just 2 points that I would like you to take home with you today. First, multi-level governance concerns the vertical and horizontal integration of governance systems, necessary to enable efficient policy making and cohesive leadership by and among all spheres of governance. In an ever-changing global context, in a resource-constrained global context and national contexts, connecting policies and strategies is essential to ensure that resources are efficiently utilized and that strategies, plans, and initiatives are consistently targeting the needs and priorities of local communities. Second, globally, there is undoubtedly a growing recognition of the importance of policy coherence and integration for more effective implementation and localization of the SDGs. Nevertheless, the examples of countries that have mainstreamed full and effective vertical and horizontal integration across levels and across policy domains are still very limited. We need to do more. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the practical examples and the global knowledge to concretely advance effective multi-level governance systems. As I said before, with only 7.5 years left to achieve the SDGs, we now need action and we need full commitment of all stakeholders to take this process forward. For us, the spirit of multi-level governance and multi-stakeholder partnerships and joined-up action is the very essence of localization. If we want to be successful in achieving the SDGs and in recovering from these unprecedented, multidimensional, highly complex crises, all governments and stakeholders from international to local must join hands and work together towards the same goals. UN Habitat, of course, is ready to work with all of you, and I truly hope that the tools we have been developing with our partners will be useful to jointly advance in this direction. Wishing you all a successful session and look forward to seeing the outcomes of this work. Thank you. Over to you, Martino.
Thanks a lot, Shipra. And indeed, we have the example, we have the practices, and we have been working in the past months with lots of partners around the globe in understanding what actually local, regional association, national governments are doing in strengthening multi-level cooperation. And it is quite impressive, the work that is out there. And but there is also, as you mentioned, lots that we have to do. And we are here to learn today, indeed. I will pass now the floor to our second guest, which is, like, I would say, the main supporter of all of this initiative and the main reason why we are here today. So Alexander Kleibrink, I hope that I mentioned well your family name, Deputy Head of Department of Sustainable Development from the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Martino. Thanks, Shipra, for the perfect introduction. I'm happy to also welcome you from Bonn today for this great occasion to launch the platform and to think more concretely about multi-level governance. I will focus now, from my ministry's perspective, on just transition as one overarching topic, because obviously not only for our ministry but also for many countries, governments, and also local governments in the world, just transition is it's a key topic. Obviously, it's a difficult topic. The question is, how can we move to more sustainable ways of living and doing economic activities while also being equitable? So also paying attention to the potential losers of that kind of transition. So this obviously, by definition, requires the interaction of different levels of governance. And I think what's interesting when you think about multi-level governance, I mean, there has been research on multi-level governance for at least 20 years, possibly more. And I think one trend which was remarkable, at least before COVID, that worldwide you could see countries on average would be more decentralized, at least on paper, if you just look at some indices. So basically on paper, you would see that cities and regional governments have received more powers of a sort. But in the end, obviously, the question is, what kind of powers did they receive? Mainly, they received more things to do, but not more resources to do. And I think this is obviously something which we can see also now after in the midst of COVID, that we do have local governments very eager to be part of this kind of just transition, but they lack the resources because they obviously had to look at other short-term priorities to fight the pandemic. So we do see this kind of imbalance between the willingness to do something also locally and the resources and also the capacities to do this. So this is the local level. But now, obviously, when you think about just transition, you think about many different aspects of what is important. You need an industrial policy, which is place-based. You need an education policy, which also takes a look into the future and asks what kind of parts of our country need what kind of occupations. So what do we need for just transition to happen? Obviously, many of those things happen at the national level. So this is the policy-making level, which has severe impacts on how a just transition can then be implemented locally. And the question then is obviously the vertical integration, a key topic we will also discuss today. How can we give more voice to cities in those kind of national level discussions on climate action plans, on climate plans, NDCs, and so on, but also on industrial policy, because we shouldn't forget a lot of this story is about economic policy and how you can really make sure at the national level that you really know what the needs are and the potentials of each part of the country. So just looking at this is obviously a greater need for vertical integration and also a greater need to involve cities and city governments earlier on in key decisions. So that's on the vertical integration side. And now the horizontal part, from our side, the diffusion part. We work a lot with Ecological, with other city networks, with C40. Obviously, city networks have an important role to play because they are the means how you can diffuse approaches, promising practices across cities, across countries, and they should be strengthened in that role. Because after all, you will need, I'm sorry, I hear that you can't see me. Can you still see me? Okay, some people can't see me, but you can still see me. So the question is how these city networks can be strengthened to really do this kind of diffusion work, because obviously every approach is local, it's different in every context, but still some main lessons, I think, on the work on green jobs in cities. I mean, there are a lot of approaches out there. obviously there's something to be learned. But I think when you think about SDGs, just transition, it becomes ever complex. No, the problem is we ask our city governments to do more and more, but obviously they don't get the resources, as mentioned earlier. They don't get the capacities to deal with the increasing number of tasks and functions that they are given. So I think these are kind of the two aspects on horizontal diffusion and vertical integration. And my last point would be about the stakeholder involvement. I mean, I think it's very complicated because you have many local processes, urban development, urban planning, how you involve citizens at that level. You have national level processes which are very different, and how you can bring those together, and how you can also raise the interest of the private sector, which obviously you need for some parts of this story that we are discussing today. How do you align this? Because obviously large companies have different interests compared to small companies. Nationwide active companies have different interests compared to multinationals. And bringing all these together across the different levels of government when it's needed and when it's required, I think this is a big challenge in the end, no? To make this a lasting process. And then my final point would be possibly the question of trust. I mean, you start all these processes, oftentimes you meet quite often, the private sector only gets involved quite late and only selectively, but then you also have to deliver. So if you don't deliver within a certain time span, and we heard, I mean, yes, we know 2030 is not far away, but for many stakeholders, obviously, you also want to see something come out of all these kind of deliberation meetings. So it's not enough to only have those kind of fora where you can meet and exchange. You also have to deliver at a certain point, and actually also quite quickly. So I think the question of trust, and as we all know, once you lose the trust, regaining trust may take too long, and I'm afraid we don't have that time. So I would really stop here. I'm very happy to be part of your discussions today. I'll try to also sneak into some of the discussions in between. I wish you fruitful discussions. Also, thanks again to our knowledge partners, to UN Habitat and to the UN System Staff College for making this a reality, and to also, of course, to my GIZ colleagues. Thanks so much, and wish you fruitful discussions.
Thank you very much, Alexander. That was very, very interesting indeed, and you have anticipated some of the discussions indeed that will happen later. You have touched upon some of the key dimensions that were the global research that the colleagues of ARCO are going to present very soon. Vertical coordination, vertical integration, result coordination, stakeholder engagement. You have like the big elephant in the room on. We are asking more and more to our cities and local governments to do, implement, deliver, but with which capacities, which are the resources, which are the enabling frameworks that we are actually putting at their disposal. And I think this is also one of the key topics that UCLG colleagues have reported on in their report to the HLPF that is recently launched. So dots connecting together. Thank you, Shipra. Thank you, Alexander. I think that it is now the moment to get to deep dive into our session, into the concept of multi-level governance. I will then pass the word to the colleagues of ARCO, Andrea and colleagues, for their presentation and introduction to the research and the main findings that they have discovered together with all of the knowledge partners that were mentioned before. And thank again to everyone for your contribution. Over to you, colleagues.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Martino. It's a real pleasure for all of us at ARCO to be here and have the opportunity to share with you this ongoing research on accelerating progress towards SDG localization and post-pandemic recovery through enhanced multi-level governance. This is really an ongoing research, so we are basically at midway, and it's great that today we can share some first ideas, arguments, insights, and evidence. But also what we want to know is to hear from your voice, to hear from your experiences. So I will be very quickly, I will speak on behalf of the whole team that I really have to thank, and on behalf of all knowledge partners who have been supporting us with insights, ideas, suggestions, and evidence. But then I really want to leave the floor to the people that are really working on the ground. I think about national governments and local governments, the the people who are presenting their own case studies and experiences, but all of you that are attending this event today. So and thanks Shipra and Alexander for your very inspiring introduction that is really committing all of us in our all specific roles to progress together, to accelerate together on SDG localization. So as you have understood from the previous speaker, so the objective of our research is to explore how effective multi-level governance systems can promote the localization of the SDGs, obviously in the context of the post-pandemic recovery. So basically, as researchers, we are trying to get new evidence. We're trying to test the hypothesis that multi-level governance is an accelerator of SDG localization. To do so, our research is composed first by a novel conceptual and analytical framework. I agree with Alexander and all our colleagues that multi-level governance has been explored and analyzed since many years, but still we need a novel conceptual analytical framework on multi-level governance for SDG localization that can really keep all the dimensions together and can really inform how to go ahead in terms of policy implications. Second, we are analyzing the main recent trends in terms of good practices, but also in terms of in-depth experiences of specific countries in the core multi-level governance drivers and practice areas. And third, we are deriving key insights and operational implications for all of us. The ambition, hopefully, is to contribute to the wider effort and the wider process which is led by UN Habitat and UN agencies, but also the knowledge partners, as also all of you are here today, to streamline a strategic framework on multi-level governance for SDG localization. In terms of methodology, you know, I mean, we are from the academia, we need to clarify as a first step what we have done and how we are conducting the research. We have been analyzing and updating the state of the art of the debate, of the academic debate, of the policy debate at the international level about the multi-level governance SDG localization nexus. This was very important. Second, we have been systematizing the international trends and good practices without any intention of being exhaustive on multi-level governance for SDG localization across the world. So we have a wide variety of different practices that we have decided to put together, to analyze, to systematize in order to get insights and evidence on how multi-level governance systems are proceeding, are pushing for SDG localization. But then this is not enough. We have decided to analyze in-depth 5 case studies that represent our living labs. So these real-world practices in Argentina, in Ghana, in Italy, in Jordan, and in the Philippines, so from different regions of the world, they really represent the way for us to explore how not only the mechanism, but how these mechanisms were put in place, how these mechanisms were realized, what are the implications, what are the effects, and what are the impacts of the different multi-level governance mechanisms for SDG localization. And then obviously, we are attempting to generalize some lessons learned and to provide action-oriented guidance elements grounded on the debate, on the analysis of trends, on the analysis of good practices, and on our in-depth case studies. So introduction, I mean, as Shipra and Alexander perfectly said, I'm going to be very, very quick on that. We are all aware that the combination and coordination of resources, action, and capacities from different governance levels, from different policy domains, and from different societal actors is crucial for the 2030 agenda, and is especially crucial for SDG localization as a process of transforming the SDGs into reality at the local level. And the centrality of multi-level governance and the centrality of SDG localization has been strongly supported by the leading role of several UN agencies, the OECD, the European Union, but also and especially local and regional governments across the world and their national, regional, and global associations. This is even more important, this is even more clear in the emergency scenario that we have been living since 2020, because, and this was strongly inspired also by the work of our knowledge partners, because we know that effective multi-level governance demands the use of a continuous adaptation of coordination mechanisms, especially for specific emergency action as responses. And last but not least, the booming VLR movement that many of you here have been supporting and contributing to has really a potential in bridging not only the review process, but really in triggering policy coherence and integration mechanisms. So in our understanding, the nexus, the linkage between multi-level governance and SDG localization is really grounded on a set of consistent and complementary principles. These are clear to all of us. These are the 2030 Agenda principles. These are the principles on effective governance for sustainable development and the specific principles on multi-level governance. But we also need to clarify, to be aware that all these principles are directly embraced also by the new urban agenda, which represent for all of us the action-oriented framework to achieve the SDGs at the local level. So this is our starting point, and this was our starting point to elaborate a specific novel analytical framework on a multi-level governance system for SDGs localization. Let me go very quickly on that. Although this is central in our research, we are conceiving multi-level governance as composed by three main drivers and dimensions: the institutional coordination mechanism across governance levels, the policy interaction across sectors, and stakeholder engagement and cooperation. These three drivers of multi-level governance systems then are realized in practice. They are mediated by enabling and or disabling factors in the different contexts, but then they are realized in the practice of the policy cycles. So we are attempting to get evidence, to get insights, to understand how the three different dimensions are realized in terms of political commitments and institutional arrangements within the planning processes, in the implementation status, and in terms of review and reporting. And clearly, based on the different practices, the multi-level governance systems for SDG localization can lead to different outputs in terms of improved multi-level governance mechanisms, and then especially in terms of different outcomes, in terms of improved functionalities for SDG localization. In other words, our analytical framework is basically composed by these metrics, where we are trying to analyze the empty cells, so how the different three dimensions, you can see vertical integration, horizontal integration, and stakeholder engagement, how they are realized into the different policy cycle stages in the different contexts. Let me go in a few minutes on our very first evidence. So when we are talking about vertical integration, we are aware that there is widespread introduction of specific legal and regulatory instruments that are establishing structures for coordination across levels of governments, or in some countries, they are adapting bodies that preceded the 2030 Agenda. This is quite widespread across the world, and several countries have started the process of aligning national, subnational, and local plans and budgets for the SDGs. In several countries, there is increasing evidence of ad hoc cooperation agreements, projects, and initiatives across levels to tailor effective localization processes. And VLRs are providing a crucial tool for local and regional governments to periodically review their SDG progress. But we really need to be aware also that the involvement of local and regional governments and their associations in national reporting exercises is not making enough progress. To raise a few examples, we are exploring the ad hoc cooperation agreements between provinces and the Consejo Nacional in Argentina. We are exploring the National SDG Coordination Committee supported by 16 regional coordination councils in Ghana. We are analyzing the collaboration agreements, the dialogue roundtables, the project Creiamo PA with all regions, autonomous provinces, and metropolitan cities in Italy. We are analyzing the way that elected municipalities and government councils are involved in the coordination committee in Jordan, and also in the Philippines, the way that the NIDAS regional development offices are responsible for drafting and coordinating regional development plans in the Philippines. In terms of horizontal integration, several national and local governments are introducing new or are adapting formal governance arrangements and informal working methods to overcome policy silos and integrate SDGs transversally between ministries and departments. So there is an increasing reliance and increasing testing of or piloting of innovative governance models and also SDGs budgeting tools to advance cross-sectoral integration. Capacity building initiatives are spread around the world to push public administration to go towards horizontal integration, but then also national and local review practices, so we refer to VNRs, VSRs, VLRs, are increasingly involving several departments and ministries to report on multiple or even all SDGs. Again, to raise a few examples from our case studies, this was the case of the National Interinstitutional Commission in Argentina, of the High-Level Ministerial Committee and SDG Implementation Coordinating Committee in Ghana, of the National Action Plan for Policy Coherence for Sustainable Development in Italy, but also the Higher Steering Committee in Jordan. This is national level, but if we go at the local level, we must go on the local level. In the same countries, we are really getting evidence of a lot of different interdepartmental coordination bodies or sustainable development steering committees for drafting and implementing SDG strategies at the local level. And then again, integrated strategies and plans that go beyond a simple environmental understanding of the SDGs, that are able to put together an integrated and embrace an integrated understanding of the SDGs, and along with strategies and plans, also result matrices and reviews. And then, last but not the least, the third dimension is stakeholder engagement. Here again, several countries have put forward formal multi-stakeholder partnership or arrangements in relation to the SDGs. Most countries are involving multiple stakeholders in the process of identifying national and local priorities and developing strategies or action plan. There is an increasing attention to multi-actor responsibilities in a whole of society perspective for SDG implementation. And again, VNR and VLR processes are most often based on strong participatory processes in order to enhance citizen engagement, but also their commitment for sustainable development. To raise a few examples for our case studies, let's think about the Social Participation Forum in Argentina, the CSO's platform and its 17 sub-platforms in Ghana, the National Forum for Sustainable Development and its 6 working groups in Italy, the National Higher Committee for Sustainable Development and its 16 task forces in Jordan, and the NIDA subcommittee on SDGs in the Philippines. But here again, once we go at the local level, we found out a lot of great variety and great evidence of local forums for stakeholder engagement, of participatory mechanisms for SDG planning and VLRs. We're aware of different initiatives such as also Venice City Solutions 2030 and etc. So in 10 minutes, we cannot mention all the different experiences, but there's seriously a lot that we should focus our attention on. So to conclude, this is my last slide to be on time. According to our progress in this research, there is a growing recognition and commitment the importance of enabling policy coherence and integration for the effective implementation of SDGs of SDG localization through enhanced multi-level governance systems. But despite this evidence, there are still limited examples of countries that have been mainstreamed full and effective vertical and horizontal integration. So all countries are making progress, but still in quite a few cases, there is a gap on the full translation of formal arrangements into effective multi-level governance mechanisms and practices. And also in a few cases, there is still, in some cases, there is still prevalence of top-down approaches, regulatory approaches that may be not always matched by adequate capacities, planning and budgetary processes across levels. So again, there is a wealth of innovative and effective policy instruments that have been piloted by cities and regions on the one side. There is a wealth of different strategic frameworks and direction on SDGs and the national level, but still, according to our point of view, there is significant margin to enhance these multiple synergies and to enhance the alignment between complementary processes and functions across governance levels, across policy domains, and across societal actors. So that's all for today. As Shipra mentioned, in the platform it's already available our preliminary report that dated a couple of months ago. We are now in the process of completing our research with insights from all of you and especially from our knowledge partners. But now it's really the moment to listen to the real world experiences of the people who are working day by day on multi-level governance mechanisms for SDG localization, and to get also other insights, other comments, and other evidence from the perspective of all participants at this event. Thank you very much, and thank you on behalf of all the team, Mario, Andrea, Elisa, and Matteo. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. Thank you very much. This is super interesting, the way the dimensions of the different dimensions of multi-level governance have been unpacked. It's quite relevant. I see, Alexander, you have your hand raised. You want to say something?
Yeah, thanks. I would like thanks so much,
Please.
Andrea. A very inspiring presentation. Now my camera did fail me, so sorry, camera is off. But I have two questions. The first question is, in the policy cycle, you don't mention policy learning or policy reappraisal as a separate cycle phase. And in the literature, obviously, some mention it. Was there a specific reason? Because obviously the whole idea about monitoring is that you learn ideally something from it. How would you conceptualize that? And the second question is, since I don't know too much in detail about the countries you mentioned, and they're kind of guiding the generalization of your findings, are they very similar countries that have different kind of outcomes, so are different to different degrees effective in terms of multi-level governance, or are they, the opposite? They are very different. Are they very similar for what you're looking at, or are they very different? And that obviously then has an implication for to what extent you can generalize from your findings. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alexander. Yeah, on the first question, definitely policy learning is part of the policy cycle. It is actually the connecting arrow that is leading to a cycle in itself. So we cannot keep these four stages as separated. They are a continuum, and the continuum is given by policy learning that happens for all stakeholders, for all government levels, for all people that are engaged. So this is explicit in our research. We may made also that explicit in the figures and in the diagram. But when we talk about policy cycle, is especially because the learning elements is what is connecting the four stages. In terms of the countries, well, the five countries, sorry, they are different in terms of, they are different because they're based in different regions of the world, different cultures and traditions, different development levels, different institutional settings in terms of centralization, of decentralizations of competencies and duties across government levels. But they are all pretty similar in the way that they are, their experience is illustrative of an effort. It's not a completely successful effort, but it's illustrative of an effort to keep together the different government levels, the different policy sectors, and the different societal actors. So in all these cases, we are finding out about similarities in terms of formal institutional structure, for instance, the national committees, but also at the local level, the intergovernmental bodies, the role of different participatory approaches. So we are pretty satisfied that we can generalize from their experience, or at least we can derive some lessons learned, keeping into account that they come from different backgrounds. And this is very important because we think they have a strong policy, they have a strong potential for, and I go back to your first question, for policy learning across the world. But then I'm happy to share new and other comments on these countries if necessary. Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alexander. Thanks, Andrea. As we are a bit delayed, and we have 10-15 minutes of delay, I would like to take all the time possible for the breakout rooms so that you can really have a proper discussion with our facilitators, knowledge partners, and specifically the case studies. So how does it work? You will be randomly distributed into 3 different breakout rooms. Breakout room number 1 is on vertical integration and will be facilitated by Cordoba from United Cities local governments, and our case study is Italy with the colleague Mara Kossu that will explain us a bit more how Italy is working. On room number 2, you will find Philippe Rode, facilitating the room on horizontal integration from London School of Economics, and I have told that we have our colleague Nasreen from Amman, because Jude could not make it today, Greater Amman Municipality. And finally, room number 3 will be facilitated by Max Boucher from Brookings Institution and will be on stakeholder engagement, and the colleague Melissa from Cordoba will be presenting the case study from Argentina indeed. So I think that we can open the breakout rooms, you will be redirected, and we will meet in this very room with me at 4:30 Central European Summer Time, so in 45 minutes more or less.
The national review integrates 12 local reviews to testify our progress in sharing the vision of the 2030 agenda and the journey towards a shared language, shared rooms and spaces for dialogue and discussion, and the same objectives. So it's a sort of deep walking SDG experience what we have entered, and we are very glad to have here to join us and in the discussion to illustrate our experience, also 2 metropolitan cities with 2 brief insights and key points to complete my presentation. I would like to share some slides, but unfortunately I'm not allowed. So I don't know if in the room I can be also an organizer so that I can share the screen. Anyway, I go ahead. What Edgardo introduced is a sort of system relating the implementation of the National Strategy for Sustainable Development, which we started to create in 2018. We had our first VNR in 2017 when the NSDS, so the Strategy for Sustainable Development, was approved. Since 2018, we started this journey with the territories. So we started with the regions, and then we went on with the metropolitan cities in 2019 and 20 to provide evidence for the contribution that policies, plans and programs can give to the achievement of the SDGs and to the respect of the principle of the 2030 agenda within the lens of the policy coherence for sustainable development. It was stressed in many speeches this afternoon for us, in these days for the others, and I think that this is the key we are using also in terms of territorial governance and multi-level governance, to use the strategies for sustainable development, the agendas, or whatever the strategic frameworks to implement the 2030 agenda at territorial level, like strategic frameworks for producing policy coherence and assessing in the whole policy cycle. We heard before about the policy cycle, the learning, the policy learning, budgeting, assessing. So it's not, we are not working about alignment, we are working about full integration of SDGs and 2030 agenda within the policy cycles at different territorial levels. In this way, we are strictly and jointly working with all of those which relates to environmental assessments, because our strategic framework and legislative framework links the National Strategy for Sustainable Development to environmental assessment in the whole policy cycle at all levels. So this is our effort in this respect. What we are trying to do is to produce and to diffuse as much as possible an adaptive and incremental support and accompanying mechanism to territories, so that they really can collaborate with us as national level. I represent the Ministry for Ecological. Thank you very much. I represent the Ministry for Ecological Transition. So from our side, we're trying to produce and adapting an incremental mechanism to support territories. So we started from our initiative from the ministerial side, proposing some expression of interest to produce agreements, as you can see, sustainability agreements for territories, starting from the regions and reaching the metropolitan cities further. And then we started a joint co-design path in order to incrementally ameliorate these initiatives, to give ground to further initiatives, and also to involve actors from the research and from the civil society and non-state actors within this path. So we had the support, as Andrea already introduced, we had the support of different mechanisms. One of those is working about competence and networks for integration and public administration in Italy. It's funded by the EU cohesion policy and is the Progetto Creiamo PRIA, also mentioned before. So what we are trying to do is to produce a community of intentions. So to gather people, both civil servants and other actors who are really committed to implement and to be part of this great transformation that 2030 agenda is calling for, and to stimulate and to fund and to implement collaboration practices involving all such actors. So linking institutions to civil society and non-state actors. The second, thank you, the next one, thank you. What we have done is to boost the collaboration with the territories through sustainability agreements, which were focused about three main issues. The third, so I start from the end, the third related to the definition of technical contents for the strategic documents. So I mean indicators, the writing, proper writing of strategic documents in terms of regional strategies for sustainable development and agendas at metropolitan level. So this one of the objectives, but the other two issues are relating to governance in the first place and participation in the second one. So we try to stimulate the creation of interdepartmental mechanism within the single institution to collaborate, to engage and to manage the complexity of the agenda so that they can dialogue and promote policy coherence for sustainable development within their whole policy cycle and programming frameworks. And this is what's happening. In this sense, we are really very much learning from these experiences. So it's quite a huge experience in this respect. The next one, Martino, please. Thank you very much. The second one is about participation. We asked institutions to engage stakeholders and also to engage local institutions, because this was a concrete and specific mandate from the legislative framework we have. So what happened is that we asked them to at least choose two of those categories so that we always have integrated agreements dealing with different aspects about the implementation of the agenda. And this produced also different steering committees within each institution we are working with, which means we are working with all the regions, we are working with the autonomous province of Trento, and we're working with all the metropolitan agendas. We have now approved 11 regional strategies and 1 metropolitan agenda, but we're really very much following, and the other ones are nearly approved. In the next months, they will be approved. So what happened is that we are combining a single work, bilateral work with each institution at territorial level, with some spaces for discussion, networking, and mutual learning, which are the roundtables already mentioned by Andrea in the presentation. So we have these roundtables. The Ministry of Ecological Transition set up in 2018 and 2019. They are dealing with the regions and autonomous provinces on one side and with metropolitan cities on the other one. And we use them to promote exchange of experience, networking, training, discussion about common documents and issues. So we very much use them as living labs about the mechanism we are producing and working about. Together with we are revising our national strategy for sustainable development. We are finalizing and approving the new strategy 2022, where the policy coherence for sustainable development is one of the main focus and is linked in a national action plan for PCSD that we worked and we delivered with the collaboration of the OECD and the funding of the European Commission from the DG reform. And this is very much looking into how to allow policy coherence to become a method of ordinary work in order to provide and ease, facilitate, and incrementally ameliorate the decision making, and to integrate 2030 agenda within our policy making. This is very much linked with the work we have to do and we are doing with the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So with the post-pandemic recovery, because we are dealing, we are strictly working with at a central level with the PNRR, so the plan and investment funding for the resilience and recovery, and we're trying to allow territories at different levels to have their strategy for sustainable development as a frame to guide, orient investments they are having from the national level and the EU level to cope and to deal with post-pandemic recovery. And in this respect, the experience of Metropolitan City of Milan is quite helpful to food for thought, to see how it can work and which kind of approach we are trying to apply. Within the scheme you see here is quite a complicated one, but it's one synthesizing the structure that the action plan for policy coherence for sustainable development drafted for integrating the 2030 agenda principle and strategic framework within policy cycle. As you can see, there is a linkage between the national level, so the mechanism we are thinking about at national level, and the territorial one. So we are trying to formalize and to see permanent territorial table, the round table I was telling you that the Ministry for Ecological Transition had with regions and metropolitan cities to gain space for the dialogue among those tables and the national mechanism through some laboratories we are promoting to align for the alignment and the assessment, sustainable development assessment of policies. And also we have a linkage with the steering committee at territorial level. You see territorial cabinet image here. There is also a focalization about the role of stakeholders. So when you see National Forum for Sustainable Development is the mechanism we have set at national level to involve stakeholders and non-state actors, which is now engaging about 200 organizations. And then we have mirrored this structure at regional level and territorial level. So we now have regional and metropolitan fora, which are part of this scheme. What's happening is that the plan will be approved. The national plan for PCSD will be approved with the National Strategy for Sustainable Development. So we are very much working about the final approval, but also already working about the implementation phase. So to put in place all the mechanisms and the processes that will guide us through this quite demanding journey that leading towards the policy coherence for sustainable development, but a lot also in terms of stakeholder engagement has been done at territorial level. Again, the example of the metropolitan city of Reggio Calabria is quite inspiring in this respect. So the civic ecosystem they have set in terms and in the education and learning processes activated at territorial level are quite interesting to our side. So what we are trying to do and what we are doing again is a sort of really collaboration and mutual learning with territories. We continue learning about their experience and we are trying to ascendantly assume and get some inspiring initiatives and practices at national level. We are also trying to widen this kind of model. So we are trying to, in the next months, what we'll do is to find a way together with the tables already in place for widening the collaboration to homogeneous areas, wide areas, so that we can engage local level, but trying to group in terms of relationships about different local entities. So to be guided by the regions and metropolitan cities to reach also all the other part of Italy, which is not covered by the metropolitan cities level. We have 14 metropolitan cities, so they just are part of whole territory. So we would like to widen this model of work and this approach to include supramunicipal and suprametropolitan level. Because at the end, let me conclude before giving the floor to my colleagues, is that what's becoming clear, and also we heard in the opening remarks, is that territories and territorial institutions are increasingly becoming agents for transformation. So we are benefiting from their commitment, and we are trying to hugely and even strongly work on collaboration at national level. But this HLPF is quite peculiar in this respect, because it's very much emphasizing the role of territories and localizing the SDGs as a crucial issue in implementing the agenda. So I really hope, and I'm really very much honored to be part of this, of the case studies, of the research, of this panel of discussion, because I do really think that in the next future, the platform and the partnerships that will raise from this experience will be helpful to also improve our work and to share it further with all the other countries, and to see how to get to cope with the challenges that the post-pandemic recovery has brought into our life. So I thank you very much, and I would like to give the floor to my colleagues, if you don't mind, Edgardo, starting from the Metropolitan City of Milan and then the Metropolitan City of Reggio Calabria. For Milan, we have the colleague Giulia Caravaglia, and from Reggio Calabria we have the colleague Giuseppe Mangano.
Okay, obviously the only point is that maybe they keep the time, then we can have a little conversation at the end. Go on, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Giulia Caravaglia. I'm here on behalf of Metropolitan City of Milan. I'm going to present you shortly just two tools that we have developed in the framework of the Agenda 2030 to territorialize our strategies and our policies. The first is the Network Lab, that is a platform that is animated by local, regional, and national stakeholders that aims at starting a discussion with our stakeholders on urgent challenges of our area, and to map projects, both completed or in progress, and to connect new stakeholders to engage them in new project on sustainable development. The second is Data Lab, that is a new tools that supports CMM, but also public administrators in the analysis and monitoring of data through a list of indicators that allow to measure and analyze the positioning of the metropolitan area with respect to the 17 sustainable goals. Data Lab, the strength of Data Lab is that is an integrated system of data, because allow us to monitor not only the Agenda 2030, but also all the metropolitan policies that refers on sustainable development, and in particular also the ones that takes into account the use of national fundings. So, we can say that the Metropolitan Agenda for Metropolitan City of Milan is the framework for intercepting and territorializing new fundings for our area. For instance, we are realizing just two big actions now. The first is the metropolitan area as a sponge city. We are projecting and realizing 19 sustainable drainage interventions under the themes of climate change, resilience, and ecological transition. And the second one is the 17 kilometers of bicycle super lanes as a part of a big project called Bike Cambio, just a big project of bicycle lane. To develop a network of slow mobility on our area. And in conclusion, I just can say that all these activities and tools are helping us to territorializing our strategies in the framework of regional and national policies. Thanks, and I give the floor to Giuseppe.
Okay, thank you to the colleague from Milan. I present myself. I'm Giuseppe Mangano. I'm an early career researcher of the Habitat Center that is represented by the Professor Nava that is here in the room. And I'll try to briefly illustrate the actions of the project RC Metro Cities in Transition, the pilot project to implement the Metropolitan Agenda for Sustainable Development in the Metropolitan City of Reggio Calabria, in which the first promoter is the Department 5 Professional Training of the Metropolitan City. The main mission of this pilot project that is going to end right now, right these days, is to transfer experiences and skills on the profiles of the green jobs through training and knowledge paths that are referable to the UN Agenda 2030 goals and targets, but also to the strategic areas of the national sustainable development strategies promoted by the Ecological Transition Minister. The pilot project is an innovative and experimental experience of multi-level and multi-stakeholder model to achieve and to implement the sustainable development in the metropolitan territory, and is capable to trigger a new participatory dimension thanks to activity of knowledge transfer and capacity building with the civic ecosystem that also the Dr. Maracosu has presented. The methodological approach adopted by RC Metro City in Transition is referred to co-design and assessment toolkits that were capable to promote, measure, and evaluate the impacts of the action. In particular, the transfer and co-design activities with the Ecosystem 2030 are referred to a cycle of technical seminars that were able to transfer content, methodologies, experiences that were useful for associations, citizens, technical representatives of other municipalities of the metropolitan cities, university students, that were also able to transfer the goals and the target referred to the planet and the prosperity areas of the national sustainable development strategies. In the last year, we promoted 2 editions of Pathways for Transversal Skills and Orientation with the target of the students of high school institutes in the metropolitan area of Reggio Calabria. So we provided training on the topics, on the issues of the ecological and digital transition to more than 150 students of these schools. But also we promoted in the last semester high training activities with the university students in the course of Sustainable Innovation Design and Thesis Atelier with Professor Nava at the Mediterranean University of Reggio Calabria. This kind of activities were useful to overcoming all the gaps in the minimum skills of young people, especially of those who come from socio-economical disadvantages families and live in the region of the South. That is the main target of our pilot project. The actual and the ongoing activity of the pilot project is the transfer of the activity on the sustainable vectors of the national sustainable strategy, to the metropolitan strategic plan promoted by another department of the metropolitan city municipality. And this is a great opportunity because we are constructing and we're building the metropolitan agenda for sustainable development, also by transferring the trajectories and visions and the idea projects that were generated in the co-design activities with Ecosystem 2030, so with the civil societies, into this important instrument that is a multi-governance and multi-level governance tool of the metropolitan city of Reggio Calabria, and that is also capable to transfer the metropolitan agenda and finding the traceability in the next territorial investment plans and program. So the impacts of the pilot project RC Metro City in Transition were of two kinds. One, external to the target community, so young students, the citizens, the associations, the so-called civic ecosystem, but also, let's say, an hardware impact, and that is capability to be part of a governance and planning tool as the strategic metropolitan plan. The project will, the traceability of the activities of the project are illustrated in a web platform that before Dr. Maracosu has shown in his slide. And for us, it's very important to continue the possibility to give evidence of the impact and of the activities of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Then the floor is open. I don't know if someone wants to take the ground to put questions, to advance some hypotheses. Please go on. If not, I will try to bring forward some questions. But
there are a couple of comments, Edgardo, a couple of hands that are raised.
Okay, I open my chat.
There is Gulzar Hamid and Milton Friesen.
I don't see them. Can you read it, please?
Yes. So the first one is.
You have Abid also that have asked for the floor. Go on, Andrea, and then Abid.
Okay, thank you. Abid Gulzar, if you want to raise comments.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Abid Gulzar. I'm a senior governance advisor with CARE International, and I'm alumni of just recent training of SSC on localization of SDG agenda. Just to quickly, actually, it's a fascinating models actually, how this whole the plan of action from the national to the subnational have been created. I have a question, 3, 4. Number one, what mechanisms you have established at these different layers which can allow citizens to participate in planning, in monitoring, and review of the annual plans and budgets, number one. Number two, I have a question about what systems you have developed and tools you are using to collect information from citizens about the implementation of those plans, or in other words, citizen-generated data. How do you use that kind of data in planning? And because we are talking about inclusive participation, what are those mechanisms which are ensuring that citizens, those who may not have an opportunity to speak, like homeless, like migrants or others, how you're creating opportunity for them to actually participate in these planning? And maybe finally, how you're really engaging civil society in this planning? Thank you so much.
Okay. Andrea, if you want, I don't know if you have similar questions before giving back the room to Mara to answer.
Not myself, but there is a question from Milton. I don't know if we want to collect both of them before the answers.
Please go on if it's close to the question of participation.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Milton Friesen. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah. Go on, please.
So, mine is just a simple question. One is the role of commercialized or business entities in supporting adoption of SDGs, adoption of VLRs. I've been concerned with our media monitoring in the last number of months with SDG adoption, plateauing or declining, or the difficulty on that front. As an example, from urban planning background, most cities depend on commercial entities to build buildings, build roads, do a lot of construction, even though cities manage the spatial planning aspects. And I'm curious in this sort of space, what role sort of commercial support can play in accelerating that lateral adoption so that it fits with the kinds of plans we've seen laid out today, which look really very good. But we have to accelerate it. There's no question. It has to move laterally. So I'd just be interested in the sense of how that fits with the academic, the municipal, civil society, and then the commercial side to help, you know, these things be complementary to each other.
Okay. There is a last, we have only 2-3 minutes. We have a last question from AZSC. I don't know who is.
Hello, yeah, my name is Ahmed. I'm a researcher and urbanist at Greater Amman Municipality. I have only one question regarding Milan, which is specifically talking about the platforms, whether it was the networking platform or the other one, which is about the data lab. In terms of public participation, my question is, how can we control the insights from the people that are coming in that are not influenced by mainstreaming ideas in general on social media? What is where we can draw the line between what is actual a basic necessity for the citizens, and also how we separate it from decisions that can take us somewhere else? For example, some of the public participation can make us not implement SDGs correctly, or shift to other SDGs, or even invent new SDGs. So my question is, what is the controlling mechanism for such platforms to be incorporated in decision making? Because this is very critical for us in Amman. We're trying to develop the same kind of platform. So it's for us the validation process and implementation that's coming from the people. Participation is critical, and I just want to understand what is the mechanism.
Thank you very much, Raja. Who want to answer? Mara, Giuseppe, Julia?
If I may, I would like to some quick replies, and then I can leave the floor to Julia for the peculiar question. So let me thank you very much for your questions, which are quite
I talked to you all in this. You ever notice the quality talk to you like an well? You ever notice that?
There is a micro you can put.
You ever notice the quality talk to you for sure say like an well? You ever notice that, or like that's why they talk also? You gotta talk to somebody today and say from the way we
stop all the
videos. You really savvy me.
Mr. Bangura speaking. I don't know if you can turn off the mic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just quickly I will try to gather them within two main blocks. The first one dealing with the relationship about the strategic documents we're working on, which are the environment where to stimulate and create policy coherence with the implementation and planning and urban planning, as mentioned by Milton. So what we're trying to do is to create the space and the rules and the engagement actors and all what we do need to guide and to orient the implementation for planning. Within this frame is a part of the reply to the last question, in my view, which means that integrated monitoring and indicators we are using at national level, which are just a few of them. We are using a few of them as common knowledge base, also at territorial level. So we have 55 indicators going up and down from the national and the local level to guarantee the monitoring of the National Strategy for Sustainable Development as a whole. So we are trying to keep under control the interlinkages and nexus between the SDGs and the different aspects of the sustainable development in this way. And we are trying to produce a sort of dialogue among different territorial levels so that we can control, but we are already, working about that. So it's a sort of practice we are starting now with the National Institute for Statistics. We are trying to create a integrated monitoring framework, NetLab and Data Lab from the metropolitan city of Milan and other experience at regional level are part of this design and this frame. So they're very much useful on how to cope with the territorial issues of the integrated monitoring. On the engagement side, what we are trying to do, we are working closely with the Department of Public Administration dealing with the National Action Plan on Open Government. So we are working on the relationship about the 2030 Agenda, the National Strategy for Sustainable Development as a mean for open government. That is why we are developing a pilot project with the Department for Public Administration dealing with the realization of a virtual environment on the national platform for consultation and participation processes, which is meant to be the main mean for the Forum for Sustainable Development and the access for all citizens to the information about the implementation of the National Strategy for Sustainable Development, but also allows to receive their feedback about the work we're doing. And as they are doing at territorial level, this is accompanied by very much focused initiative, both at metropolitan and regional level, which are involving directly people and citizens and in their focuses and workshops and roundtables. So it's a sort of integrated vision of what we can do at different levels. And we are trying to call for the real engagement of all the state, non-state actors. I'm not talking about civil society because they want us to talk about non-state actors, because enterprises are fully part of this scheme. And in the new National Strategy for Sustainable Development, we are developing innovative partnership dealing with and engaging institutions on one side, research and academia as incubators for innovation, and then we have enterprises, and then we have citizens and youngest people to promote new ideas. So we are trying to define a common ground, a real common ground among different actors and different territorial levels to boost. But of course, what's lacking and what we are really much working into is to bring single planning and single planning processes to adhere to this common ground and common vision and framework from the agenda.
Thank you very much. One question to Martino. Martino, we need to move to the plenary, or will we still have 1 minute or not?
We have 2 minutes. I just put in the chat. We have 3 minutes. We shall be going back at 4:35 or something.
Okay. I don't know, Julia, you want to answer the questions or?
Yes, sure. Just very shortly. Nice question. Very interesting. I can say that this issue we have not already understood deeply, because we have launched the platform in January, and so we have collected some feedbacks, some challenges, best practices already developed on the in our municipalities. And I think that is the issue that we are going to understand in the next months. And by now, I think the key actors of this integration of all division by civil society and all stakeholders, and also to balance it, are for us the municipalities, because as metropolitan area, we integrate the vision of our 133 municipalities that have the contact with citizens and all the association and stakeholders. And so I think we are going to deal this issue in the next months.
Let me, if I have the privilege to facilitating the session, then let me bring a question to all of you. As multi-level governance is a complex undertaking that needs to take into account the different spheres of government. For the moment, the Italian strategy, as you presented, is focused on regions, autonomous provinces, and metropolitan areas. Nevertheless, to guide, to propose a really multi-level governance, you need to take into consideration intermediary cities, small municipalities, to support territorial cohesion, to have a more balanced and integrated and even polycentric urban system. Or the problem here is I didn't see where, for the moment, are the 107 provinces and the 7,900 municipalities of the country. Some of them, I understand from the metropolitan cities, that they are trying to connect with some of the municipalities of the metropolitan, close to the metropolitan areas, but still have a problem.
My name is Nisreen Dawood. I'm the manager of sustainable development and Amman resilience unit in Greater Amman municipality. It is my pleasure to be here with you today to give you a brief about Amman experience and the integration, mainly in horizontal integration. I will start, if anybody is interested, with a short brief about Amman. It's the capital of Jordan and the country economic and political and cultural center. Amman has an area of 800 square kilometers with around 4.2 million inhabitants. Just an interesting note here that Amman was 1.8 million people before 12 years. Now it's more than doubled in the past 12-13 years. And this is one of the major challenges in Amman, along with rapid urbanization, scarce natural resources, in particular water. We are the second poorest country in the world in regarding water. We don't have an adequate public transportation. We have a lot of high level of unemployment. We suffer a lot with refugees for the past 100 years. Amman was always the destination of refugees, and now around 1/3 of its population are immigrants. And though it's considered as one of our development challenges, yet we are trying to be able to live and grow and integrating the migrants within our society. All of our services as a municipality is directed to all of Amman inhabitants, regardless of their legal status. And and on the institutional level, Amman is managed by Greater Amman municipality. It is an independent civil governmental institution responsible for our municipal services. Integration in general is one of the values and practices in Greater Amman municipality. Amman was always an integrated city in all aspects of either services or community engagement. We try to work smartly and efficiently, and we needed to use an integration approach, whether it's vertical because we are part of a governmental system, or on the horizontal aspects. Greater Amman municipality is led by the city council. It's around 40% members. 22 are elected on the 22 districts around Amman, and the other 20 are assigned by the king, along with the mayor of Amman. He is assigned, not elected. On the horizontal integration, we work in 2 levels. On the external integration, we work with other institutions, not only vertical. We work with technical teams around all the national government institutions. For example, we worked with the Climate Change Directorate in the Ministry of Environment to fulfill our climate change commitment as a country. And as a city, one of the successful experience is launching Amman Climate Action Plan. We worked as a team with all the related parties from the public, the private sector, the civil society organization, the international organization. We worked together as a national committee to prioritize our risks and challenges and propose the best practices to each of the challenges with the ambitious goal to reduce 40% of our greenhouse gases emissions by 2030 and reach zero carbon in 2050. The plan was published in 2019 and it is aligned with the national goals and commitments. What we do in this aspect usually that we have two committees. One is the steering committee and the other one is the technical committee. The steering committee usually responsible for validation of the all processes and outcome, making sure the alignment with the national vision and the national priorities, while the technical committee is usually responsible for all the hard work, either on the analysis, the assessment, proposing initiative and drafting the final reports in collaboration with all stakeholders. The second level of horizontal integration is internal within Greater Amman municipality. Our organizational structure have 6 sectors. Public service sector, which is responsible for mobility, infrastructure, engineering, road networks, and public facilities and green and open spaces. We have also the other sector is environment, which is responsible for waste management, construction inspections, and all the environmental issues. The third sector is health and agriculture. It's responsible for forest management, health inspections, and management of public markets. The fourth sector is a community development, where we work with the community on cultural and social affairs, sport, and entertainment activities. The fifth sector is the planning and economic development, which is concerning planning, master planning, zoning, building permits, licensing, sustainable development. And finally, the financial and administration sector, which it's in charge for the financial control and the municipalities' revenues and expenses. The organizational structure itself needs a good and comprehensive integration horizontal approach, especially for the initiatives that need multi-sectoral collaboration. We work together with our common goal. Usually, this is our approach. For big projects, what we do is establishing a multi-sectoral committee or a team led by the end user or owner of the project, and sometimes it will be led by the city manager if it's a city-wide initiative. For example, while preparing Amman VLR, efforts was led by GAM VLR committee. All stakeholders from the public and private sector, from civil society, from international organizations, United Nations agencies, everybody participated on the preparation of the report on participatory methodology. More than 60 entities participated and were consulted on preparing the VLR. It is completed now and it will be launched on the high-level political forum 2022 next week. We also work during the COVID-19 on an integration approach as well. We did a task force. We established a task force committee for Amman to manage all the activities that was provided for the society during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a conclusion, Integration is a must in order for Amman to provide its services. We need always the support of the community, and we are working together with all stakeholders to make Amman a more resilient and smart city. This is an introduction of what we do. Hopefully I covered all the aspects that is needed for this discussion.
Great, thank you very much. You, in fact, were even faster than we scheduled. Incredibly interesting insights from Amman, helpful to differentiate what you refer to as the external integration and collaboration and the internal. The internal, just again as a reminder, you're operating with these key distinct 6 sectors which you're trying to bring closer together. You have referred to the VLRs making an important contribution for the more broader engagement also of civil society, and then in the case of the emergency of COVID, operating with a task force which brings things all together. Let me open it up with a specific question, but I suggest that we then also take a few more questions which clarify the Amman case, and then in a second round we can open it up also to your cities and experiences from around the world in relation to horizontal integration. And colleagues, throughout, please leave your comments in the chat or use your hands if you want to come in. The more you can turn on your cameras, the better, because that will allow us to feel a bit we are together in a conversation. If you have technical difficulties, obviously don't worry. So Nisreen, the question I have is, are there concrete examples which you also may have witnessed where the situation, the level of integratedness within the Greater Amman municipalities has improved, and where you have indeed seen in the past institutional arrangements or structures that hindered integration, where teams weren't working enough with each other, where also you had more negative outcomes as a consequence, and then you did pursue specific reforms that improved the level of integratedness. That would be sort of my first question. Obviously, you referred a lot to the success of the moment. Would be interesting to see whether these were learnings from the past and improving over the last years. Nisreen, over to you.
Yeah, yes, of course, we are not perfect. Nobody is, but we also try to learn from our previous experience. For example, on the integration, horizontal integration experience with services providers, institutions, we had a lot of challenges regarding the coordination between these services. For example, we pave our street, then the water institution will build their networks on the next month, and so on for the electricity and the communication ministry. So what we are trying to do now, actually, it's not perfect yet, but we are doing our best, is on a coordination plan between these entities. We are trying to share our plans, the actual plans and the work that we are doing. So, for example, Amman, we know that the water authority will put their network on April, so we do our pavement on May, for example. This is a work in progress. It is not solved yet because we use the different system. For example, the GIS data, it's in a different system. We used the Palestinian code, they used an international code, and this was really a challenge for Amman. We're trying also to establish a database for the city, for all the city data and information to be shared with our partners. So this is one of the challenges. Also, another thing that we used to work alone as a municipality. We know that we have a national goal, but we never, I believe before maybe 10 years, had a good coordination meeting, for example, with the Ministry of Environment, that we are as a country, we need to reduce the greenhouse gases, but what is our goal as a city? This is what we did in the climate action plan, and before that, as a bigger umbrella with the resilience, Amman resilience strategy that was launched in 2017. For the first time, I think, and forever, we sat in the same table. We discussed. Actually, it was for 4 hours meeting. The first hour was a war between all of the entities. And then we reached a common ground where everybody was honest about his responsibility and each of our organization's responsibility. That was the approach that everybody now knows what he needs to do. Every institution is clear with its responsibility. We know, for example, now that the climate change, it's the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment and the Climate Change Directorate in the Ministry of Environment. But also we have our role, we have our commitments, but we need to work on parallel with the alignment of the national goal.
Great, thank you very much. Again, this broad perspective of, on the one hand, the very humble challenge of getting road infrastructure and construction of and opening the roads for all sorts of processes more coordinated. I'm sure there isn't a single city in this call that doesn't still struggle with that. But a perfect example where new GIS and communication technology actually can completely solve it. If you have a database of your roads, you have the schedule when they're going to be opened by different utilities, someone else comes in and you say, okay, you need to wait a few weeks or a month, and everyone needs a green light before they can actually dig up the roads. And there are lots of good examples of how this was improved. But then again, you also mentioned the far more complex trade-off space of climate action and interventions. So fascinating to hear about this. Let's open this up. So as I mentioned, let's keep it initially to a few more questions about Amman. Anything you'd like to understand a bit better so we can really appreciate that case, an important case study as part of this ARCO report. And then we can also hear about your own experiences contributing to integrated governance. Who would like to have come in with further questions? I don't want to occupy the space here too much. I have so many questions, but let's just see whether others do. Okay, I don't see any hand. So let's just clarify a few more points. So integrated approaches become particularly interesting if they need to address conflictual topics where there are different interests, where let's say the transport department and the environment department are naturally thinking in different directions. Or you can use, the health and the planning department, any of your 6. What happens if they are at conflict with each other? What is the device that's activated that then either finds an agreement that is a middle ground, or where, let's say, on the carbon front, then maybe the carbon reduction priority is giving the full support by maybe the mayor or the council over another sort of better departmental priority. Nisreen, how is that solved in the case of Amman?
Yeah, When we want to work on a national or a citywide level initiatives, we do have a committee to work on each of the aspects. For example, the climate change committee. I want to elaborate on this because we have two climate change committee. We have a national level climate change committee, and we have a city level climate change committee. For the national level, it's a sort of a steering committee that put the policies and priorities of the whole country. And our plans and our initiatives is aligned and driven from these policies and from these plans. What we work on the city level is on the climate change committee. The climate change committee, we have 17 members from all the sectors of GAM. We have representatives from the public sector, from transportation, from waste management, from the forestry and urban agriculture. We have representatives from the higher management, from the city manager office. We have representatives from the urban planning, urban researchers, even communication and international communication department. We have also from the engineering director, from everybody. All the sectors in GAM are represented in this committee. We meet monthly, but if there's an urgent issue, we have a meeting every 2 weeks for specific projects. The priority, we set our priorities according to actual assessment on the city. Nobody will say that it is the priority is for waste or for transportation, because we work on a science-based decision making. We see what is the highest contribution of greenhouse gases in the city. For example, now is building and transportation. So we direct our work on the transportation system. We recently started our Amman BRT experimental operation for the Amman BRT. It is our first public transport system in the city. This is, for example, one of the priority. On parallel, we know that waste is also a priority, especially after the COVID-19 and the refugees. The amount of municipal waste doubled. So we need to work on this aspect. We are working on recycling plan. We work on reducing municipal waste plan. We work also on enhancing and development of Amman municipal waste landfill. We have also tried to use the methane gas and our biogas recovery facility. The Amman biogas project in Amman landfill covers now 40% of our electricity consumption, which is a good actually number for now. Hopefully, within the next 5 years, it will cover 100% of our electricity consumption. So this is what we do. We work on science-based decision making on data and actual data around the city.
Thank you so much. And again, you brought it back to some of these broader mechanisms which we can extract. It seems in the case of Amman, the national broad direction and steer the national vision on these key points is always a reference point which you go back to. It's, I think, also enforced by what you mentioned at the beginning, that half of your city councillors are appointed. There is the role of the national government also in, or the king indeed, assigning or appointing the mayor. So that's one very strong steer. And then you refer to the committee work, which seems to, in many instances, be ultimately more decisive and more impactful than maybe the individual departments pursuing action, which may have the potential to contradict. So the committee as the integrating force, and then besides, at the end, you came back to, of course, again, the digital opportunities. Good. So if there are no further questions for Nisreen, let's open it up on broader experiences on the idea of horizontal cross-sectoral integration, such an important topic. We haven't also at this point linked it back directly to the SDGs. That in itself is, of course, an enormous task. In some ways, the SDGs representing, you could say, 16 sectors plus governance to make up the 17, or at least more sectoral concerns, key fundamental topics. But if you go through them, they have strong alignment with certain departments usually taking the lead. So we can reflect on those. Let's just see whether colleagues want to come in on sharing their experience, having further questions. Also, do share your frustration with the integration that doesn't work, that doesn't take place. I'm clearly struggling. No, here, Gertrude, thank you. Wonderful. Please help me.
Hello, everyone. I'm coming in here from East Africa, particularly right now in Uganda. I'm Ugandan, but I work for the East African Local Government Association, so I greet you all. I want to thank you all for the presentations you've made around the subject. I find it very interesting because in terms of our mandate at the regional level, we are quite interested in building more stronger coordination between the national levels and the local government levels. And I was quite keen to hear from the various experiences. Perhaps just to share from an experience I know very well, which is from Uganda's perspective, and to be able to learn together with you more insights on how we can make this better. What is being practiced is that originally there was that kind of sectoral approach where you had, for example, the health sector at government level, the ministry, forming, of course, its coordination committee, and then they pick a representative of local governments who usually would be from the association, the national association, to provide the voice of local governments. And then whatever decisions they'll make, they'll provide the roadmap on which the local governments would work in that sector. It had a lot of challenges because it came up with multiple reporting centers. It came up with all sorts of different issues around coordination and implementation. Progressively, what has happened in Uganda, and maybe it can also speak to the SDGs, is that they have moved from what they call the sector approach to the program approach in the national planning process. And the national development plan right now is program oriented, where they use the thematic areas and all the ministries do make contribution with a lead ministry identified for that program thematic area. Now, this kind of reflection makes sure that at national level, the working group now, the program working group, is housed by one identified ministry. Let's say it is a health sector program. Definitely the Ministry of Health would take lead, but all the other ministries would join in, be it transport, education. They would join in onto that working group to build synergies around common areas of implementation and action. And then that, whatever processes come out, are then sent down to local governments to provide guidance. My challenge, it is a new approach. It's kind of like 2 years into its road, into its way. But my challenge then is that this kind of reflection is yet to be seen at local governments. They're still stuck in the sector approach, so they struggle a bit. They struggle a bit to onboard the synergies within their own development plans and action programs. So there is need for capacity building in that respect, which I think, if done nicely, would be a good way of building synergies and promoting multi-level coordination and action and interaction, for that matter. With respect to the SDGs, the National Development Plan has been aligned to the SDGs agenda, and the targets have been onboarded. So because of that process, there's been a bit of a tipping of the balance in the bottom-up approach to planning, in that even when the local governments do come up with their own development plans, in as long as it is not aligned to the national one, they'll have to revisit their priorities. And that tips the issue of local priorities taking the principal place in the planning processes. And for me, those are part of the frustrations I would look out for in this case. But I think it is caused by that element of trying to build these synergies, these interactions at multi-level. So we need to find a place whereby the local priorities remain at the heart of local governance systems and planning processes to be responsive enough to community priorities and needs, but also to provide the similar structures at the local government level, so that the effectiveness of that approach can be of benefit and achieve the intended purpose. So what am I saying here is that the will is there in Uganda, but the institutional framework needs to be made better, and also the actors need to be prepared better for this kind of change and approach to be more useful and relevant to them. So far, that is what is on table, and I'm keen to listen in for more stories on how best that can be changed for Uganda, so that we can replicate across the East African region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. Fascinating insight. I mean, the main story here, from sector to program as a major approach, reminds me also what GIZ has worked on more than a decade ago, with the idea of building out nexuses, or a key nexus approach, which overcomes the sectoral thinking. And secondly, your reference to shifting priorities as part of SDG alignment. Now, that's, of course, a fascinating acknowledgement. Sometimes I wonder if governments have to shift quite a bit their priorities because they now want to align with SDGs. It makes you wonder, what was their agenda before, if it's so contradictory to the SDGs? I mean, what were these kind of KPIs they were pursuing? My sort of hunch is that they were probably focusing on one or two SDGs, and very much ignoring maybe negative consequences for others. And once again, that's then where the term integration is, of course, quite central. Good, thank you for that. Anyone else who'd like to follow up on sharing experiences? Clearly, there must be very rich insights from around the world in this virtual space. So don't be shy, help us to hear more about those experiences. Okay, no one would like to follow up. So let me then maybe make a few more observations and also comments, particularly now in relation to the SDG agenda. And again, maybe Gertrude and also Nisreen, you could come in here. If we have the ambition of mainstreaming the SDGs into our local government systems, but we also are acutely aware that a situation like COVID, like a climate emergency, and like any sort of crisis points will at any moment, and has over the last years at any moment, very much put the priority on certain elements of the SDGs. Which ones are you most worried about that fall under the table? And which ones are you most hopeful that they will actually be tackled in a more integrated way moving forward? Has this been becoming clear in your day-to-day job? Is it quite visible where also, whether it's the committees which Nisreen talked about, what their appetite really is, what their dedication is about, which of the SDGs, and same for you, Gertrude, with your program approach, I'll be seeing a new prioritization. Maybe Nisreen, if you come in first, what's the risk of being the stuff that's being maybe ignored too much or dropped to the bottom of the priority?
Yes, the risk that we have is, as a city, the municipality is not responsible for all the city services. We are not responsible for education, for health, for security, for water, electricity, all other services. This, as a city, put a risk that we emphasize on the SDGs that we are responsible for. We emphasize on the resilience, on waste, on the society. Even it's not a big contribution, but we emphasize on this SDG. We work on transportation, we work on infrastructure, but we almost do almost nothing for, as a municipality, for education, only maybe the infrastructure and sidewalks, and we know that this will help improving the educational system, that we provide good streets and good road network and sidewalks network and transportation, but there's a lack of collaboration and coordination in this aspect. On the health as well, maybe the COVID-19 pandemic gave us a small hint that we need to work with the Ministry of Health, we need to work with the Ministry of Education, but as I told you, the responsibilities, it's scattered, and this will affect the implementation of the SDGs.
Thank you very much. Really important emphasis on what the city is not responsible for. And in our multi-level governance introduction, we did hear a lot about coordination, but the good old point about the distribution of power in the first instance, let alone how it's then being coordinated, creates itself sometimes a bit of a void at the local level. Gertrude, similar question to you. What's being dropped maybe a bit too much for your taste, and where is it really working, the new SDG agenda?
Well, drawing from particularly the COVID experiences in Uganda, I think what COVID brought on was the fact that it emphasized the issue of partnerships. And we saw that the role of local governments coming in more, because at the beginning, government felt in Uganda it would march alone, but when it came to actual implementation of the strategies to fight COVID, it had to come back to the local governments at the end of the day to reach the people. So we've seen a very huge investment in the SDG around partnerships. And in Uganda, actually, most of the SDGs have been devolved services, and the local governments do take responsibility for them, apart from security issues, which remain issues of central government. But I think the SDGs that stand to face the threat of being left out are those that address themselves, like SDG 14, life below water, things like investing in responsible consumption, because it goes into the aspect of what needs to be done, needs to get done, and things like decent work and economic innovation, because it's more now about survival, good health conditions, education. We should be able to make sure that we are building strong institutions of local governments to be able to deliver. Of course, poverty is a key one, and issues of climate are also beginning to go up the ladder because it's impacting on the productivity of the country. So basically, I think issues of efficiencies, issues around reducing inequalities struggle a bit in a bid to deliver on what they find or consider as the most crucial and priority interventions for now, since post-COVID, to move towards post-COVID when it comes to SDGs. Yeah, this is what I'm seeing, and actually this is what I'm seeing across the region, not just for Uganda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, if you're in Uganda, that life in the oceans is not a priority at the city level. They're very important to re-emphasize. More interesting that even sort of the responsible consumption bit may be less of a priority at this point. Let's come back to something where cities usually have quite a lot of control. And I think, Nazreen, you also made that point. And it is about the physical development. It's about the infrastructure. It's about transport. In some instances, of course, housing. Now, we know the latest IPCC report has talked a lot about that one of the key mechanisms through which we can prevent future carbon built-up is ideally not only to build less with steel and concrete, that's a different story, but to start limiting the horizontal expansion of our cities. The degree we build new roads into sort of the nowhere land, to what extent we are building also housing because it's cheaper at the urban periphery, rather than really bringing more life, more energy, more people in the end into the existing urban fabric. And conventional sort of integrated urban development is all about recognizing that the way we produce transport infrastructures and where we put housing, that all of those things are ultimately about providing better access to the city for our citizens. And therefore, the most important spatial integrated development agenda clearly seems to be one where you produce proximities, public transport access, again, Nazreen, your point about BRT, and trying to really build up the city internally and overcome what we have done for 50 years, which is build the urban motorways and the urban expansion and so on. Now, the reality is that probably in both of your cities, Nazreen and Gertrude, you will, and across Uganda, you'll still have probably considerable forces for urban peripheralization, urban expansion, and governments are actually really struggling with that agenda, which is part of the new urban agenda. It's part of also indirectly in the SDGs. So how does the horizontal integration story, a recognition that housing needs to be in better locations, that transport needs to be about people rather than vehicles, how is this landing in sort of the committee discussions, in the integrated governance approach of Aman, Nazreen, placemaking in a more integrated way? Are you detecting changes, or are we still seeing the explosion of the city into the hinterland?
Actually, we're still suffering from this, regardless of our plans and our work. The challenge is that most of the land is private-owned lots owned by the public, not the public, private sector, and the individual. This put a lot of pressure on the city. We couldn't control the urban sprawl. This put a lot of pressure on the delivery of the municipal services and the infrastructure, and people build their houses on their own land, even if it's like
slow process of cultivating trust across sectors, the use of the SDGs as a common platform to align values. And here, we are all aware that political disagreements, within regional governments engaging with partners that might not be aware with the SDG framework. And so how, again, can city leaders build that trust that enable to bring stakeholders around the same table? And the third theme that I think is important from what we heard is to what extent engaging with those partners and those stakeholders unlock new resources. Shipra mentioned it, cities have more to do, but less resources. And so how can these new governance arrangements and collaboration can actually bring capital from business community, can bring in resources and ideas from universities, the youth, and the civil society. So also here, I look forward to the conversation later, your reaction. This is really a peer learning platform, so feel free in the chat to share resources, reports, ideas, from your cities, regions, and organizations. And for now, I will give the floor to Melissa Golondi-Novak, who is the General Director for Articulation and Institutional Affairs at the Ministry of Coordination of the province of Cordoba. So Melissa, the floor is yours. You have about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll come back for the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max, and I'm very happy to be here from the province of Cordoba. So I have a presentation, but I don't know if I can share it, if you allow me, to make it more funny with some images there, and you don't hear only my voice.
You should be able to share the screen. Perfect.
Yeah. Can you see it or not?
No, we can't see it.
Sorry.
One second.
Do we have a tech issue?
I already sent it by email to you. If you have it, maybe it could be fastest.
I can try to share my screen if you want. I'm from UN Habitat with the slides.
That'd be great. Anyone who has the who can share their screen.
Yeah, but meanwhile, I can start explaining a little bit, so you don't have this space in between. So as I said, I'm from the province of Cordoba, and this is an experience located in Latin America, in the Latin American region, and specifically in the southernmost country in the world, which is Argentina. And Cordoba, I think most of you know Buenos Aires, which is the biggest province in Argentina. So Cordoba is the second largest province and the second most populous province in the country. And it has a very important characteristic, which is that this is the most municipalized province in the country. So we have more than 400 municipalities and communes. So it is a challenge. I know that we are going to talk about this multi-stakeholders engagement, but also in relation with multi-governance, multi-level governance. This is also a very important issue for us. I don't know if, you will, that's okay. Thank you very much. So for the province of Cordoba, the 2030 agenda is basically is a central framework and language that allowed us to develop or development model, sustainable development model. So you can go to the next one if you can do it. And it's important for us because it gave us the tool to connect or make an interdependent dialogue between three dimensions: the social, the economic, and the environment. So if you move to the next slide, you are going to see that. And we also adopt this agenda through a process of territorialization. And in this process of territorialization, we are involving, because it's a continuous process, the different actors that are part of the development. So I mean the private sector, the academia, and also the civil society. So here you can see our main priority, which is the social dimension. The focus of Cordoba and also the decision that was taken with the different actors that are part of the province, governmental, I mean municipalities, and also non-governmental actors. We decided all together, because of our characteristic, because of our challenges nowadays, that the social dimension of the agenda is our main priority. And when I'm saying social dimension, I'm talking about the sustainable development goals that are related to the well-being of people. So the SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 included. Particularly SDG 1 for us is the core of our actions. So the reduction of poverty in a multidimensional focus, which also includes not only income, but also the other parts of the social dimension of SDGs, is very important. And in that sense, we conduct social inclusion through the generation of work. This is our main core. And I said at the beginning that the agenda, the 2030 agenda and the SDGs for us are the framework for the development, but also we are like convinced that the way to achieve these SDGs is by concrete actions. So it's a language, it's a framework, but it's a manner to do concrete actions. So this is very important to make. It's not an institutional development. We work towards concrete actions with the stakeholders. So the importance of working with them is that our results at the end are better because we are working all together and we have the different dimensions in it. So you can move to the other one. So I will make a very brief summary about it, because we have like 6 years working with the agenda, and we been doing a lot of things. So first of all, we started like aligning our political actions to the SDGs, and you can see it in this webpage, which in Spanish is Gestión Abierta, but in English, Open Management Portal. And this was the first action that we developed in a process of co-creation with the civil society. We decided that we need to show the civil society what we were doing, but working with them. And we developed this web page in which you can enter and see the different actions of the government through the different SDGs and the different axis of the government itself. But it was, as I said, a co-creation process with the civil society. And the other important thing is that in 2017, we were invited by the OECD to be part of the process of territorialization with other 10 cities and regions of the world. We were the first locality or a region in the whole America, and not only Latin America, in whole America, to be part of this pilot. And then we have the pleasure to share this scenario with Paraná from Brazil. So we are the two regions that were part of this territorialization process. And the experience of Cordoba here was experienced, again, based on multi-level governance and multi-stakeholder co-creation process. And I will explain a little bit more about this territorialization, but to finish this slide, Another key element that we developed in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic was to trying to answer the importance of financial resources to achieve the SDGs. No? Which are the resources, the financial tools that we have in order to achieve the SDGs. And we made our provincial budget aligned to the 2030 agenda, and this year is the second year that we have our provincial budget aligned to the SDGs. And it helped us in order to see how we are working towards and in which parts we are not putting that much financial effort, so to make a balance there. And this is also a horizontal process because it involves different actors from the provincial government, different ministers. And a very important characteristic is that this budget is also a put focus on the SDG 5. So this is aligned to gender equality. So the Ministry of the Women in Cordoba is one of the key actors being participating here. And finally, we are presenting this year and in the forum that I'm nowadays in New York, our first voluntary local review that you can observe here all our experience. So you can move to the next one, and I will explain with the next. Maybe the next one is better because we don't have that much time to make it shorter. This slide and the slide that is at the end, I will explain two different experiences that are connected with multi-stakeholder involvement. So this is more related to how we are involving multi-stakeholders in the decision of our provincial priorities in relation to the 2030 agenda. And the other slide that I will tell you when to move, but keep it in this one, but to make the difference, is related to how we work every day with multi-stakeholders in every decision that we make for our government. No? And all of it, as I said, is connected to the 2030 agenda and to our priorities. No, but it's not only to decide which are our main goals or main targets or main indicators. It's also, as I said, the last slide is going to show you, is also a matter of concrete actions, of specific policies to achievement of the SDGs. But let me focus on this one. This was this process of territorialization of SDGs in the province. As I said, we had the opportunity and a great pleasure to work with the OECD and 10 other cities and regions of the world, from Belgium, from Japan, Brazil, and others. And it was also a peer learning processes. But the main characteristic is that this was a common decision with stakeholders. So we were working during 2 years in order to find and decide all together which are our priorities, because in the sense that we need to put focus in our challenges. No? As I said, it is a territorialization process. It involves taking into account the cultural characteristics, the social dimensions, the economic dimensions of our territory. So we developed this process all together with different multi-stakeholders and different actors in 3 different stages, and they were 146 participants from ministries, universities, the private sectors, NGOs, and also municipalities. And the first stage, what we do is to prioritize which are our main goals and which are our targets. So it was like a very interesting dynamic in which we decided that our main goals are the first 5 SDGs, the social, and also we prioritized 42 targets of the whole agenda. And in the second stage, as I said at the beginning, we understand the importance of connecting the social dimension with the other dimensions of the agenda, economic, institutional, and the the size that is working towards environmental issues. And this is very important. As I said, we work specifically to reduce poverty and inequality in a region, but we do this also or mainly with working towards employment and development of a new matrix of economic based on circular economy, based on knowledge economy, based on a new energy matrix that involves environmental concerns. And we also, so in this second stage, what we do all together is to understand the interlink between SDGs and targets. So how the other part of the agenda, the economic, the institutional, and the environmental, is working towards social, which is our priority. And finally, in the third stage, this matrix of interrelationship provide us a tool to define concrete lines of actions. Concrete lines of actions that nowadays are our main priority. We are working towards these concrete lines of actions that are relating mainly with housing, that are relating with a kind of work which is or programs for the promotion and inclusion of the most excluded people in labor. This is also related with water, sanitation, and also related with digital gap. So these are our lines of actions, and these are our main priorities nowadays. So if you can move to the other one. As I said, we work not only with this territorialization, with multi-stakeholders, but every day in our government. And the agenda is our umbrella of everything that we are doing nowadays. So here you can observe that, of course, we are working with the national government. As at the beginning you explained, we are working with the National Council for Coordination of Social Policies, which is the national point, the focal point at the national level that works with the agenda. And also with other provincial and regional governments, we created different institutional frameworks of integration with other provinces. And it is interesting because Cordoba has been kind of case to other provinces, and we are like sharing our experiences. And now they are including also, they're making their own webpage where to show or to make it transparent the actions towards the SDGs, the provincial budget, also from another province like Santa Fe, which is very similar to our province. And we are also working with local governments. I can say that our main work is with municipalities. As I said at the beginning, we have more than 400 municipalities and communes in the province. So we articulate programs and we coordinate the implementation of these programs, mainly on our focus, which are the social focus, food programs, mobility programs, health programs, and gender policy programs, for example. All of them are coordinated with municipal level. But going to the multi-stakeholder, and this is my last part, I want to make this point again that our work every day is based on multi-stakeholder. And one important example is, for example, the programs to include people or to promote labor in the most excluded people, like women, because we still have, I think not only in Cordoba, but in the world, a big gap regarding salaries, accessibility to kind of jobs, etc. So we have programs to include women and diversities in the economy, also programs for people with disability and others. And these programs oriented to employment and education for employment, we work them with the private sector, and we co-finance the program. It's not only that we coordinate the application, but also the private sector provide us resources in order to achieve this. So the commitment to the inclusion of people in this area is also from the point of view of financial resources. And you can see these two examples. We have like also governmental organisms that in the main boards, in the decision-making areas, are part of the private sector are part of it, and also the academic sector. So to finalize, I think it is important to remark that the agenda is a tool for concrete political actions, and we cannot work alone. And we need to work in a multi-level governance with all the levels of governance, and specifically in Cordoba with the municipalities and communes, and with all actors that are involved in the different stage of the making policy process. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa. You covered actually all the 3 breakout rooms, from horizontal, vertical integration, and stakeholder engagement. So really, this was outstanding. I'm gonna just a few things. I'm gonna look at Telman, as my clock. Please, Telman, in the chat, if you can give us your sense of like when we'll need to end the conversation, so that we can have a sense of the time that we have. Colleagues, please really do feel free to share in the chat, your comments, your questions, ideas as well, reactions, to Melissa. You can either write in the chat, or as Andrea just did, you can use the raise function. I will hold my question for now to Melissa and really go directly to the roundtable. Andrea, please go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you, Max. I'll try to do it verbally. It's probably quicker than writing it up all together. Thank you, Melissa. My name is Andrea Agostinucci. I'm the other Andrea of the ARCO research team, in charge of these analysis of this research. I wanted just first of all to thank Melissa. Melissa, as you know, we had last week our interview for the research, and then today again you presented a bit more specific or further specific elements from the angle of stakeholder engagement. But then, as Max said, actually you touched altogether, I guess, the 3 dimensions, which are obviously inherently interconnected, and presenting again, I believe, very instructive, very illustrative, very interesting elements from the experience of Cordoba, of which really, as we said last week, stakeholder engagement and participatory mechanisms constitute really one of the key defining and qualifying dimensions, I believe. So thanks again, really, Melissa, and I promise after this we'll leave you alone for a while. No more requests for some time. Let me just, Max, very quickly to take advantage and raise a couple of issues for the discussion, or questions if time is allowed. Looking a bit at the preliminary findings of our analysis, there's an issue that I believe, at least in my sense, in my understanding, is quite important, and it didn't come up so far as distinct, as clear in terms of concrete evidence as others in the research, which is the specific impact of multi-stakeholder dialogue and engagement processes in relation, in terms of specific contributions to the implementation side of SDG strategies and plans. There are, of course, a lot of examples and very clear evidence as to the inputs and contribution to the co-design, the co-construction, the monitoring and review of strategies and plans, building and enabling government's accountability in the process, contributing to information, awareness raising, dissemination and the like. In my sense, a bit less as to what are the specific mechanisms and practices and tools through which these materializes in terms of concrete synergies in the implementation phase of the strategy. So my question is a bit to Melissa, but to other representatives, of course, exactly on these, how in your experience does the process of dialogue with different stakeholders also materialize in terms of specific complementarities and specific synergies for joint implementation? And this can refer, I guess, to a few elements, certainly in generally the activation of partnership for the mobilization of specific additional relevant competencies and resources, which have obviously in turn an impact in terms of improved functions and capacities for SDGs localization, enabling a continuity and a stronger alignment between the different stages, again, from strategies formulation across budgeting and implementation, expanding articulation with other actors and with other levels. For example, like an interesting case in our research in Italy in relation to the external dimension of the 2030 agenda, for example, engaging and aligning international development cooperation actors or facilitating access to territorial decentralized cooperation networks as an important source of good practices and experiences. And then finally, the most important, I would say, getting concrete examples from you, possibly, or your view in general on, as I was saying, specific practices, tools, arrangements that are being tested as a result and through the partnership between governments at different levels and civil society organizations, academia, the private sector, very important as it was mentioned, to really improve local and regional governments' management capacities, I would say, in relation to effective SDGs localization processes. And to conclude, a couple of examples there. We can think of a public-private partnership mechanism, the use of public procurement in public management, innovative investment and financial tools and products, some specific arrangements for possibly sharing between the different actors functions for joint service delivery, the issue of elaboration and facilitation of access to specific data sets to facilitate, again, monitoring functions and the like. So these are just examples where I think certainly, I mean, for example, Melissa, you very clear mentioned the co-management and the co-implementation of very specific initiatives and programs. So no doubt that this is happening, but again, it would be interesting, and in my opinion, but maybe I'm wrong, but by initial sense is that we should build a bit more in terms of concrete examples of what are these tools that are being piloted and tested to really create and practice innovative solutions in this sense, you know, as a backup to local governments, management capacities and function through synergies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea, for sharing these. And so, Melissa, concrete actions, I think this is what sort of the, that you mentioned several times. What does it look like? Do you have examples of specific joint implementation processes that you've seen? And this ties a bit to Joanna's question also in terms of the specific mechanism to build those concrete partnerships.
Okay. At the beginning, I mentioned that we developed, okay, our main goals are the social and reduction of poverty is our main priority in Cordoba. And we give answer to that by creating a new matrix of development in the government. This is a matrix 2030, and it is a new model for our economic development. And this was a co-creation process with this area that includes all the industries and all the private sector, the enterprises. We have like very small enterprises that are not the biggest one, but I don't know how to say in English this word. And we based on that, this process, and also with the help and support of the academy, the Catholic University of Cordoba and a university. And the National University of Cordoba, we developed a new matrix for our economic development 2 years ago, and it included the different, and it has the impact on different laws, different laws that promote a new ways of making development based on the economic side. So, for example, new laws are related to the promotion of knowledge economy, and it involves the promotion of the inclusion of this kind of way of developing industries, and some here like some facilities and some incentives for the private sector that now are promoting the software industries, the other industries related to knowledge, and in that sense this was a process of making decision as a co-creation process, but also it has results in relation to the generation of laws that promote this new matrix, this new economic matrix for the social sustainable development. But at the same time, this was also involved, like accompanied by laws related to what kind of energy this or what kind of inputs these industries will need. And so we promoted also, based on this new matrix, the inclusion of bio in Spanish is biocombustibles. I don't know how to say in English. it's like bio-fluent, I think. So fluent that are based on, how can I say it, on renewable energies. So now the enterprises are incorporating this kind of sustainable ways of making the economy in a way. So this is a concrete action. No? This is a process of making decision between actors, the private sector, the academy, and then the conclusion is a new matrix, is a new development model in order to promote the labor in our region with attention to sustainable development goals, because we put attention to SDGs related to the environmental issues. So I think that's the concrete action. And another one is the promotion of a table, which is a forum, SDG forum, which is the Cordoba SDG forum, but at the end it became a Latin American SDG forum, and there are it is made by more than 100 enterprises, NGOs, and universities, and every month we meet each other and discuss how we are working towards particular SDGs. And after that, these discussions, these enterprises, these NGOs have been including in their actions the process of making reports to society. These reports that show how they are working towards the SDGs and how they are doing, in which are their concrete actions, for example, including women in the hierarchical positions in their industries or in their enterprises, how people with disability are being included by some quotes in the process of in their own processes. So in these reports, they are showing how they are achieving, and showing how they are achieving and making transparent implies actions itself. No, and nowadays this is kind of like engagement process, and as a process of making like more knowledgeable the people about the SDGs, but also it involves at the end concrete actions.
Thank you, Melissa. I want to go to Roy's question on participation and taxes, but since we are on the topic of businesses, I see a question here from Nihal. Melissa, you mentioned a bit, this like co-design, bringing in businesses, the private sector. Can I push you a bit on this, and maybe anyone else, in the room? We often hear, like businesses, as you mentioned, reporting on their progress, but can you give us a sense of what those conversations look like between the provincial government and those businesses to really have them put, resources, investments next to their commitments? And we often, hear lofty goals, but how do you actually go towards those concrete actions? Nihal mentioned maybe incentives. Can you give us a sense a bit of those conversations with the private sector?
Okay. So we have like different institutional spaces where we have conversations. It's not that the conversations are not institutionalized. There are like different spaces that are already for years a space where we have conversations with them. For example, we have the provincial councils that are related to different themes or topics, industrial, labor, gender, environmental issues, and there we meet each other, and based on these meetings we make the consensus about which are the political actions we are going to conduct from the government, but with their agreement. We have also these intersectoral tables. They're not only composed by the private sector, but also by universities and NGOs or civil society organizations. And another way of including them, so I'm talking about the background, no? The different tables and councils in which we are meeting each other, and based on these dialogues we co-create the policies. And another way of meeting is, as I said at the end of the presentation, is including the private sector and also the academy in the organisms that are part of the government. So these are mixed societies, we said in like legally in Cordoba. So it's a public-private organism, organ, I can say. So in the board of these organisms, you have representatives from the universities and from the private. For example, I was part of the creation of the Cordoba Agency for Connectivity, which is a new agency. It has already of like 1 year and a half. And the objective of this agency is to develop infrastructure for connectivity, optic fiber, and also to develop programs for digital inclusion in the province. And the board of this agency is or has representatives from the university, and the university, we have more than 10 universities, I think 12 universities, and the oldest in Argentina. So all together decided who is the representative of them. So in the decision-making process in this area, which is very important for us because it's related to internet, to production, to economic and social development, the decisions are making with the academy in that sense. And in another example is the Agency for Innovation and to promote innovation and new ways of different enterprises. And the board of it is made by a private sector and they also put resources in order to cooperate in the creation of new innovative projects in the province. And the incentives, I was saying about the framework, the institutional framework, some tables or intersectoral tables, the councils, and also the private sector, the academia, and the civil society are part of the boards of some organisms that make decisions and make the policies. And about the incentives, I can make one example but I have a lot, or I have plenty of them. One example is, I said we made a law for the promotion of biofluent in different industries. So those who include this kind of sustainable energy, they obtain some facilities from the government now in relation to taxes or in relation to other kinds of economic incentives. So this is an example of how we are like bringing them to the sustainable development agenda, making them part of the decision-making process of the policy. So we are taking into account their own challenges, their own ideas, their own interests, but in tables, in councils, and being part of the organisms, being part of the governmental decision-making process, and also promoting some incentives in order to include some actions that at the end are going to be better for the sustainable development of our province. And I can make a third example. As I said, labor and the promotion of jobs is very important for us because we understand that is the way of reducing poverty. We are focusing on developing or giving opportunities to people to be included in our society through labor. And we have different programs, as I said, for women, for young people also, and we co-financed this with the enterprises. For example, we give women like different courses and educational processes in order them or us, because I'm also a woman in that sense, in order to us to have more tools, abilities, and skills to enter the enterprises, and then the enterprises received us there. So this is also a kind of co-creation process and an incentive to enterprises, because the government is in the first part of the process of inclusion in the labor market, but giving tools, skills, abilities, and then the enterprises received people with those abilities and include them in their companies. No?
Thank you.
So
thank you.
that's another example.
I know that Telman and Martino will take notes and capture those examples for the report. We have a few minutes. I really want to get to Roy's question, which Roy, if you're still here, also please feel free to to share a couple of remarks. Otherwise, two aspects in that question. One is around participation. I mean, the most important stakeholders are residents. So maybe if you can touch on a bit, the way Cordoba has, bring in surveys, or to bring in the communities, in the strategy. And also, if you can, Melissa, how did this affect trust in public institutions? And maybe if you know, on terms of the fiscal basis, I think Roy, asking to what extent increased trust from residents leads to higher tax compliance. So on the democracy aspect and trust, and if possible, on the fiscal component as well. Thank you, Roy, for that question.
Okay, I will start with trust. The promise of Cordoba has a long trajectory making this processes of making transparent the actions of the government. And as I said at the beginning, we have this platform where you can observe which are our actions, and there are database that you can disaggregate where from these numbers come. And this was also a process of open government. We are part of the Alliance for Open Government Partnership, which is an international organization related to open government. And a way of making trust or build trust is to show clearly how we are working with our resources, how we are working with our decision-making processes, and how we are co-creating these decision-making processes, because building trust is not only to show, it's also to include. And as I said, most of our policies are a result of our co-creation policies, co-creation processes. We also have nowadays, yes. And so I go into the other part. Yeah, it was about the physical, the spaces where people can participate. So I will make one example, because we have different examples. We have these in the neighborhoods of the main cities. We have 4 main cities where most people are, more than 50% of population of Cordoba are located there. And there we have these, in Spanish is consejos barriales, which are councils for
Hi, Andrea. I think that we just got trapped here. I'm going to ask them to bring us to the plenary. Sorry about that.
To the main lobby.
Plenary.
Yeah, so we're just waiting. I think almost all the rooms are closing, so just a minute where we are all back.
Let me last. I was just talking. It's a question I have to later, maybe by writing. Mara, we can deal with the question, because this was a critical question of our section in Italy, for example, and that is underlined by the voluntary subnational review of the Italian municipality.
Yeah, no, Guava, while we wait, if you want to we have a minute.
Okay, people are joining. Hello, welcome back, everyone. Apologies for some of these abrupt closing, and you were literally thrown back into the plenary. But I hope that we are more or less all here. I see that we have 60 participants in the room, so I think that more or less we should be all here. I was jumping in between the different breakout rooms. Discussions were super interesting. Thanks a lot for all the facilitators, to all the case studies, really super active discussion. I have the feeling that we could have stayed there for another couple of hours, which is a pity that we didn't. It's also true that this is not an expert group meeting. Otherwise, we would have called it that. But I hope that, and I think that one of the lessons learned is that there is much more to discuss. So what is certainly true is that this is only the first of many of sessions, discussions that we hope to hold together with all of you. I can already tell you that today we will launch the platform, but during Urban October, so throughout the month of October, we are planning to launch the final version and the official launch of the research that is providing a bit the knowledge basis for these discussions today. So we will have another occasion to retake the momentum and further discuss what we started today. I don't think that there is need and it is not foreseen the need to report or to discuss what was already discussed in the breakout rooms. I think that all of you had the chance to exchange, and I hope that it was more than fruitful. In case of any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself, to the team at UN Habitat. We can put you in touch so that eventually, if you have further questions for the colleagues that you were exchanging with during the breakout rooms, you can continue this exchange offline. Now we have a clue moment, which is kind of the moment of sharing what has been done in the past. Not only, I mean, one of the few of the things that have been done in the past. As you probably know, this initiative is part of the BMZ effort and toolkit to recover forward. And in this effort, many parties have contributed. One of which is certainly the United Nations System Staff College. Simona, colleagues, I think in the agenda there was first a presentation from UN Habitat and BMZ as well. But do you mind if I give you the floor so that we kind of change a bit topic and we go more into the course and the learning that you have delivered, which is very interesting. Would it be good for you?
Absolutely no problem, Martino, and thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you, colleagues, for all the interesting discussions. I had the pleasure of listening in a little bit in Group 1 just now, and indeed, there could be a lot more time spent, obviously, in discussing and lessons learned from the various examples presented. So as Martino said, there were different initiatives that the Ministry of Development Cooperation that Alexander has represented or is representing and has spoken about in his opening words, has supported through the German Agency for Cooperation. One is the platform that Martino has been presenting and we've been discussing, and another is a course for local champions that has just concluded actually a few days ago, and that I would like to briefly present to give you just a glimpse of some of the findings that came from the course. Just give me a second so that I can share my screen. I hope you can see it now. Could anyone confirm that you can see it?
Yes.
So this was a course that has essentially concluded just a few days ago, and it was run indeed by the United Nations System Staff College. This is our campus in Bonn. Our headquarters is actually in Turin in Italy. So the example of the city of Milan that was just presented in Group 1 is essentially just from our neighbors. The course was online entirely, and the logic behind was to say that we really need to focus on accelerating speed and ambition, as everyone has said since the beginning today, only 7.5 years left, and that therefore we really want to focus on this idea of transformation often happening at the margins and identifying those concrete examples that can be brought to scale that we can learn from. So we recruited a group of localization champions, and in fact, I'm very happy to say that a few of them are in this side event today as well, and are actively part of the discussants, representing all sectors and regions, and really bringing each one very concrete examples from municipalities, academia, civil society, the private sector, as well as different representatives from the UN and other actors. The idea of the course was to equip the participants on the one hand with a comprehensive understanding of the 2030 agenda, and in that sense, not just saying, you know, the SDGs exist, etc., and that everyone knows, but really, what are the framework, what are the concepts that are different compared to our approach to sustainable development in the past, and how can we focus on synergies, how can we identify entry points for transformation. Secondly, of course, bringing a group of local champions together was all about providing opportunities to exchange and generate an understanding and a future group of peers that can connect and continue working with each other. And thirdly, to provide critical competencies for multi-sectoral work and leadership through specific competency workshops that were run by different experts. And I'm going to be fast because I really just want to give you the gist of the idea. So it was 13 sessions over 10 weeks. On the one hand, the substantive ones, then the share and connect sessions that were mainly to ensure that the cohort of learners would connect and be able to take things forward among them, and the competency workshops. And then when we asked at the end, you know, what are some of your takeaways? And I don't expect you to be able to read this. This is just to say that there were many takeaways on those three areas, substantive, competency, as well as share and connect. Quite a few relevant things came out that I'd like to share just in a nutshell. So in terms of substance, the core notions that came out were that essentially around this issue of sustainable development and the 2030 agenda, that the SDGs, that the agenda is more than the SDGs, that it's really about a different concept that is holistic, and what does it really mean when we say integrated approaches? And I think we've heard it in all the breakout groups just now, how important it is to dissect and understand how can we work across sectors, across silos, across timescales, across levels of governance, and what kind of thinking will help us, talking about futures thinking, scenario building, design thinking. Then looking at concrete examples of localizing the agenda, looking at specific local realities and unpacking them. And finally, what are some of the institutional and governance frameworks, incentives, behaviors, values, and attitudes that allow us to bring to shift the needle and bring the population along. Some of the key ingredients that were mentioned that are relevant in approaching localization were equity, inclusiveness, empowerment, and broad-based participation. And I think, again, this echoes with what was discussed in the groups as well. When we looked at the competencies required to act as local sustainability champions, what participants really retained was indeed this idea of collaboration. You cannot analyze a problem individually. You cannot do it at your desk. You need to involve different stakeholders. You need to truly value different perspectives, and you need to be ready to unlearn. You need to be ready to question what you thought you knew, and you need to go beyond the technical approaches. And then the issue of leadership, to really looking at individual and collective coherence. What values are you basing yourself on? To what extent are you able to step out from this idea of being the individual superhero, but rather collaborative leadership, growth mindset? and what are the values that we convey in our institutions and in the collective, and how are they connected to the 2030 agenda? So a bit of an introspection, and what does it mean for the way we lead and engage others? And lastly, in terms of the share and connect, so the moments when the participants came together to discuss and engage, the takeaway that essentially this has become a group of peers that can become a network that can be there for each other going forward. The whole question of the knowns and the unknowns. How can we know what we don't know, and how can we use each other to be more aware? And then one other takeaway, and again, this is just a few examples, that the global goals will not percolate by themselves, that they require an enabling environment and a sustained adoption of practices. So I'll leave it there. We have, as I said, a number of the participants also in the call, and if there are any other takeaways from the course that you'd like to share in the chat, I think at this point is not the moment to give the floor. And here are just some last key takeaways from the work of the participants. Looking at, and the pictures that you see are essentially mini pictures of, that you can guess, mini pictures of the many different practices and initiatives of participants. The inspiration from the multiple examples, again, the importance of leadership, collaboration, and collective value creation. And this point that I mentioned also in the beginning, that transformation many times starts at the margins, in the periphery, and at the local level, but often remains ignored for too long. And that therefore there is a value in identifying local solutions that are working to address wicked problems. We live in a world where we do not always have easy causal relationships, and we need to learn to live with that ambiguity. And how do we spot emergence? How do we spot where the new paradigm is emerging, and how do we accompany that, and how do we accompany the losers that will also inevitably be part of that transition? And Alexander spoke to that in the very beginning in terms of the just transition. So I'll leave it there. This is in a nutshell what came from the 2 months course. I'd like to use the occasion again to thank BMZ and through Alexander and GIZ. I've seen they're also representatives on the call for the gracious support that has allowed us to run the course. And let me leave it here and hand back over to you, Martino.
Thanks a lot, Simona. I hope that it is not a problem if we go 10 minutes over time, because I will first open the floor to any potential question to Simona, because this is a very, very interesting process that you have put together, and like linking to your last slide, localization do not only exist, but it's also the solution. No? It's the way ahead. No, it's really what matters. And I was listening in different rooms, and few of the colleagues highlighted the centrality of localization and local action, also within the HUPF in the context that we are celebrating this event in. And indeed, and what sometimes what the language that we use now is like localization. Local governments are more and more actors of change, and they are more in the central of the global debate and of development action. The reality, it has always been like this. So their centrality has always been central. They've always been central. Simply that they were not given the voices and the means and the resources to deliver on their mandate. What is good and what has changed now is that we are finally slowly realizing that this is important, and I think that we are having today this panel that demonstrates that. We jump back, maybe if there are no further questions for Simona, on the broader concept of multi-level governance. I was told by the colleagues of the team that maybe Edgardo, Max, Philippe, you wanted to share something out of the rooms. I know that the discussion was very inspiring, so I came back to the main plenary a bit later, and I might have missed your wish to maybe say a couple of words on what was discussed in the room. Colleagues, if you want to share before we present the platform.
How long, Martino? 2 minutes?
As much as you wish, Ricardo, you're the king here, so I do want you to.
No, I will try to wrap up a little, because I think the experience of Italy is particularly important, innovative in the way they are addressing the nexus between multi-level governance, localization, and policy cohesion. And the way they are trying to achieve a collaborative culture and practices with between national, local territories and networks, and even there are still some gaps. The question here, they are building a complex architecture to strengthen multi-level governance mechanisms from the high level to different territorial levels, using sometimes previous institutional mechanisms of the State Regions Conference, or creating new modalities for integrated decision-making processes. So they express specific agreements, tailor-made steering committees, institutional roundtables and forums. They advance technical assistance and financial support for region and metropolitan cities through specific projects, and we learn from some of these projects from Reggio Calabria, from Milano, as well as the development of new tools that they were not mentioned during the debate, but reading the voluntary national review from Italy for me is very interesting. The concept of matrix and coherent fish and labs that were mentioned for the alignment between national, regional, and metropolitan cities plans. Then the importance of substantive metropolitan coordination and can ensure the alignment of the strategic decision making with the distribution of resources in the metropolitan area. And then the key dimension that for me is one of the key added values of the Italian experience is the link between the national, local processes and the EU, the European Union processes, to mobilize and monitor the implementation of structural funds and territorial cohesion policies for the cycle 2021-2027, involving some national authorities in mapping the links between sustainable development strategies and EU policies. That, I think, wrap up a bit what was the presentation of our colleagues from Italy. Some of the questions were related to how participation is more or less reflected in these mechanisms, and the data, the participation not only from civil society, but also from the business side, from the commercial point of view, and finally, how data are integrated overall from data developed by other partners, that official or institutional partners. That's it.
Thanks a lot, Edgardo. And indeed, I was able to follow a bit the discussion from and the presentation of the Italian colleagues, and it's very much, I would say, articulated and very, 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 very interesting. And the good thing about Italy is that, I mean, these experiences are just starting and like very, very promising. Not just starting, but there's a real process behind. But you know, when we talk about just few years of the national strategy, the regional one, like the reality is that these processes would take longer to have their final development. So yes, I can say just starting. Maybe Max, Philippe, if you want to share something from your own rooms before we move ahead.
Sure. Let me maybe build on what we have heard about the question of vertical integration. So we focused on horizontal integration with the case of Amman, with Nisrin Daoud giving us a very good overview what is happening in the city. And we employed then a bit also in the discussion an interesting test to understand what actually improved over the last years. Where were we able to detect in the past patterns of disintegration which are now being dealt with? And Nisrin identified sort of two main domains. She referred to it as sort of an external device and an internal device. And the external also reminded us that in the case of Amman, it's not that easy to separate out horizontal from vertical integration, because the national government maintains quite a lot of important roles in relation to making sure that sectoral coordination takes place through a range of different committees, but also by actually being quite proactive and also determining how city government looks like, including appointing the mayor through the king. On the sort of local level, you then have 6 sectors which ultimately require a lot of integration: transport, environment, health, community development planning and finance. And you immediately also get a sense that when we talk about horizontal integration at the local level, there's a really important question about what's missing in this list. Education, health, and a few other sectors aren't dealt with at all as part of the urban, the city government-led integration efforts. By contrast, items that relate around the development of space and urban physical development is quite advanced. We were then testing to what extent the new integration mechanisms are able to tackle the ultimate issue for spatial development around quite rapid urban sprawl, and that clearly remains an enormous challenge, has a lot to do also with the land ownership patterns in the city and the country. So there's still work to be done. We also, I should say, had really good input by Gertrude Rosé from Uganda, who highlighted an approach which she referred to as from sectoral to program development, which reminded me a bit what GIZ was advocating for with the nexus approach. So move away from silos of sectoral perspectives and look at connection points, which then leads to shifting priorities also around the SDGs, and very helpful to inquire in that context what agenda items of the SDGs are dropping to the bottom and which ones are coming up as part of those integrated, new integrated efforts. These were the main points that we discussed. Thank you.
Very briefly for room 3, we're almost at time. So our room was on stakeholder engagement. So we explored the realm of leadership, innovation, resources that are present outside of public government, and how cities, regions can harness the leadership of their stakeholders. And so Melissa Grandi-Novak from Cordoba presented her insight from the province. 2 main takeaways. First is that new models of governance are emerging to harness and connect and collaborate with stakeholders, business forums, surveys to bring in the voice of residents. It requires really intentionality from public administrations to get the SDGs out of City Hall and public governments to bring in those ideas and those resources. Workshops, meetings, really cultivating that trust and these relationships over time so that they sustain, again, different political cycles and turnover. The second one that really Melissa hit the nail on was around concrete action. Stakeholder engagement, their value is to bring resources and to align efforts in the same direction. And so great examples, for the team, at UN Habitat and ARCO to collect from Cordoba around the inclusion of women in the labor force, working with businesses to open job opportunities as well as housing. So I hope that the team was taking notes because we really had a lot of great examples. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Philippe. And I mean, this is, I hope, was interesting for also the other colleagues that were not able to follow the other rooms. It was certainly to me, and I hope that also the colleagues of ARCO have collected some of these inputs, because this is what makes the research and the knowledge advancing. And I really thank you, facilitators, for the great job in facilitating these rooms. Working into breakout rooms is not the easiest of jobs. It's always nice, but it's not the easiest. So I really hope that you have enjoyed as much as I enjoyed listening to you, and I really thank you for your work. We have other 2 little things to celebrate. I'm just wondering, because I see that Mr. Jafar Yavan, the director of the United Nations System Staff College is here. So maybe as we are running a bit late, I will give you the floor, and then we will present the platform so that we don't take too much of your time. And thank you a lot for being here today.
Thank you very much, Martino. Ms. Shipra Narayan Suri, Dr. Alexander Klibring, Martino, Miraglia, and my own colleague Simona. Distinguished participants and dear colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the speakers and the panelists for their valuable contributions to the side event on the occasion of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development 2022. Also, I would like to share my deepest gratitude to all who joined us today and helped to make this event as successful as it was. Hearing and learning from speakers, panelists, and the audience has provided me and all of us here with enriching experience about increasing the connectivity and coherence between governance structures. And you may be asking for what? As you know, implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its underlying principle of leaving no one behind relies heavily on enhanced collaboration among all spheres of government and with all stakeholders. And I cannot emphasize strongly enough that we find ourselves in a very decisive moment for the long-term well-being of humanity and the planet. Right now, thousands of people like you from all over the world are collectively thinking and debating on how to effectively address the challenges that we could not anticipate when we first adopted the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs long time ago in 2015. I'm talking about the global pandemic, which we all very aware of, the new armed conflicts, the climate and food crisis, and of course, the immense educational setbacks. As many fear that we are losing ground on the SDG implementation, today I leave this event with a sense of hope, cautious hope, because a strong declaration with robust political support can only be successful if accompanied by a strong understanding of how to implement. And we have contributed all to that objective. As such, we have seen in the discussions that addressing today's challenges requires serious attention and strong coordination with all governance levels. This allows us to understand the complexities and steer the necessary synergies for the transformative work we are all called to do. The overall goal, of course, is to improve the lives of billions of people through the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Against this background, let me go through some of the I would say some of the main issues that has come up through the discussions. So first is the understanding of the synergies for the transformative work that we all do. We talked about it. And to do this, let's talk about the SDG localization, which in my view, as someone who has done quite a bit of work on development at the local level, is really at the heart of the issue. First, SDG localization is about transforming our common vision into realities at the local level, in coherence with the national frameworks and in line with communities' priorities. In this regard, local and regional governance structures are essential to localize the Universal 2030 Agenda with its 17 SDGs. Subsequently, strong multilateral governance frameworks are characterized by coherence and coordination between different levels of government and the involvement of all stakeholders. This means creating the necessary structures and processes for increased accountability, transparency, responsiveness, the rule of law, and stability. But let us please do not forget the critical ingredients for success is equity, inclusiveness, empowerment, and broad-based participation. Finally, please note that transformation many times starts at the margins, in the peripheries, at the local level, but often remains ignored for too long. Our role in support of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda is therefore to identify, understand these actions, ideas, and initiatives, and create an enabling environment for them to take place, be seen, be sustained, and be upscaled. As you can see, governance is not only about interacting with formal, established, or well-known processes and institutions. It is also about observing, anticipating, and reading the overall environment correctly. I invite you to look beyond your levels of actions and comfort zone and actively move across horizontal, vertical, formal, informal, established, and emerging structures. The future is not in our hands, but our decisions today will influence future outcomes. We have to be brave and bold as we focus on the vision of a better, more just and sustainable world, and think very carefully about the steps we need to take today to embark on pathways that lead to the future we want. When the UN Secretary General presented our common agenda with his quintet of change for the United Nations, he formulated this challenge as the option between breakdown or breakthrough. More than a challenge, it is a choice. Are we ready to shape the transformation that is needed, or do we wait for things to unfold by themselves? The examples we heard today gave us a glimpse of what is possible toward a world where opportunities are available, where resources are distributed and regenerated, and where people practice solidarity within and beyond borders as global citizens. This, distinguished participants, my dear colleagues, is the only way to accelerate progress towards the SDG and contribute to implementing our common future for planet, people, and prosperity. I thank you again for your contributions, and I hope to see you all again soon, hopefully in person. And I hope that we can continue to learn together and work together for a better world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director. It was very inspiring, and I think that you chose the exact right words to close a couple of hours of very, very, very inspiring and intense discussion among a wide variety of speakers.
Thank you.
We are a bit late. I would like just to give the floor to my colleague Telman to show you what we have done, and to share the link also to the multi-level governance platform, so that you can go home with something also concrete to share with your partners, and where you can also find the research that the colleagues of ARCO have been talking about, and that where I hope that you will be able to find more knowledge or resources. Over to you, Telman.
Thank you very much, Martina, for the floor. And I would also like to thank everyone participating here, and also the speakers and facilitators that helped us to deliver this event. Thank you very much. And I would like to share my screen. So I will be shortly presenting the multi-level governance and SDG localization platform that we have developed together with this close support of GIZ and BMZ and our partners. But before deep diving into the digital platform, I would like to shortly describe what was the actual vision behind this digital platform. Of course, as we have understood, this is a part of a project supported by GIZ and BMZ. But while envisioning the development of this digital platform, we were thinking to not just deliver something, but also go beyond it and
create a momentum and a new movement towards enhanced multi-level governance and SDG localization. And with that, we were thinking to create something where all the stakeholders, you and me and everyone, should come together and discuss about enhanced multi-level governance, share experience, go to the repository and read about other case studies. And for that, we were thinking to make the multi-level governance digital platform as user-friendly as possible. Therefore, I would like now to follow you through the some screenshots that we have made of the digital platform. We will be also sharing the link for the digital platform. It's now fully online, and I'm happy to say that we are officially launching the digital platform today. So this is the homepage. As you can see in the homepage, the user is able to direct to tabs such as About, Resources, Training, Events, and Contacts pages. And then we have created the website and developed in the sense that the users who are not, who don't want to go to those tabs can just scroll down and they will have a snapshot of different tabs. So by scrolling down from left to right, we will see that the user will first understand why actually this digital platform is online and why it was developed. And then it will understand the meaning, a short description of why multi-level governance is important. And by scrolling down, the user will understand why multi-level governance is actually essential for localizing the sustainable development goals, and why in itself the localizing sustainable development goals is important for the achievement of SDGs. And by scrolling down, the user will find the featured resources, selected resource from our site, and the first one is the preliminary synthesis report developed by our research team, ARCA colleagues that are also in this call. By going to the trainings tab, the user will have the access to different trainings that are provided by us and by our knowledge partners, and they can access the trainings here online as well. And of course, as the website also shows, that the events are also showcased so that the user is aware of every event that UN Habitat and its partners are organizing. And then there's also an opportunity for the user to contact us and our knowledge partners. Right now, the system is built in a way that the user will approach to us and we will direct it, if necessary, to the knowledge partners for direct contacts. And of course, I would like to say that this without the close support of the partners wouldn't be possible. And of course, the Tony Pipa and Max Buscher from Brookings Institutions did also very much support us in this process. But as I said, we try to make this as user-friendly as possible and as accessible as possible. Therefore, we also developed this in the mobile application, mobile version as well. So the people that don't have access to computers or that they would like to work on their phone, they have also the possibility to access the website online, which is actually fitted to the form of the mobile phone that will not make any problems with it. Thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor back to Martino.
Thanks a lot, Telman. And Claudia has just put on the link to the platform in the chat where you can visit, you can have a look. It's really at the beginning, I would say, and we hope to make it even more lively, more resourceful. And you will see in that platform the most and final version also of the global research that will get inspired from the discussions today. I won't really try to summarize what we have discussed today because it's quite an effort. I will conclude by thanking every single one of you that have participated in this discussion. all the partners, the knowledge partners, ARCO, UCLG, LCCTs, Brookings Institution, Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance, United Nations System Staff College, and of course the colleagues of BNZ and GIZ for really giving us the possibility of being here today. Shipra said that at UN Habitat we truly believe in the power of partnership, co-creation, and today, seeing all these institutions, all these great minds, but also all these local experiences and local leaders coming together is what I think can move things forward, where we can create just that little bit of impact that then we can harness to become something transformative. This is for us the first step in a certain direction that we want to go in the future with all of you. So you will sure receive much more emails, much more communication. Follow us on our social media, because this is something that we really want you to get involved and to share your experiences with. That said, thank you again. I wish you a very beautiful Friday and hopefully a nice and peaceful weekend as well. And we will keep in touch very soon. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.